is 365 Sports, powered by SicEm365.com.
Iamaleava, end zone, diving attempt. It is caught for a touchdown. Chris Brazel puts Tennessee back on top.
365 Sports is presented by IdealMRI.com. High-quality MRIs for $497 or less. IdealMRI.com. Your health is important, so is your budget.
Cranks it up, goes downfield, and gets it complete. Here goes Restrepo again, spinning his way, kept his balance inside the 5.
365 Sports is also brought to you by Texas Farm Bureau Insurance, protecting Texans since 1952.
There was no defensive pass interference.
Oh, my goodness.
The ball will be at the 9-yard line.
Kirby Smart did not believe it, so Bill Lamagna, a discussion. They have changed the call, which is an enormous moment in this game.
365 Sports is turbocharged by Unite Private Networks. Find out more at uniteprivatenetworks.com.
How about that spin move? Bryson Daly, and a Daly double across the goal line.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
All right, buckle up. We have an enormous amount of stories to get to, looking back at wins and losses and moments in college football, and quite frankly, setting up yet another really good week in college football. Good afternoon. We are 365 Sports, and that includes you, the viewer, who is watching us. Also, whether it's on SicEm 365 app, YouTube, at 365 Sports YT, and then, of course, right here on 365 Sports and YouTube. Paul Catalina to my left, Craig Smoak to my right. I'm David Smoak, and here we go. We will get to that game and all of that went with it in Austin between Georgia and Texas, and what does it mean? How does everything shake out when it comes to the top 25, et cetera, in just a moment. But in the Big 12, Iowa State found a way. BYU found a way. Kansas State took care of their business. Those three schools, and yes, there are others, but those three schools, Paul, continue right now after the separation of the weekend to be the three that you feel like those are the ones in the end that will be playing in Arlington, two of those three in Arlington in December.
I think they are separating themselves because of the consistency and the way that it comes down to winning close games, right? Well, BYU and Oklahoma State and UCF are not teams that things have gone well for them in the last month, and then they finally are in both those games, and what happens at the end? BYU, Iowa State find a way to win. A very similar situation for West Virginia, things not going well, but Kansas State came in there on a day where Neil Brown did not need them to give up 45 points, and they scored 45 points. It was bad. So there is some, I don't think it's, monumentous distance. Like this isn't, some of those years where it's like Oklahoma and then who's gonna wind up being 9-3 to play against them for the right to lose by 25 points in the championship game. This is still very close, but I do think that those three teams have shown the ability to be consistent over any of the rest of them.
Yeah, I think that that's fair to say that those are the three that are kind of standing out. I think Cincinnati could say something about that. I think obviously Colorado can still say something about that. I mean, they have the same record as K-State does. Obviously, though, K-State would have a head-to-head, and you start getting into the minutia of all of that. But let's clarify what the main thing is that separates those. We're not talking about within the conference, really. We're talking about nationally, because that's what separates them. Mm-hmm. Because Colorado, like I said, is 3-1. Cincinnati's 3-1. Texas Tech's 3-1 in the Big 12. The thing that separates those three that you're talking about is they're 7-0, 7-0, and 6-1. That's what separates them. They are the Big 12's playoff hopes. They are the Big 12's only hopes for playoff teams because based on how the rankings are going, no two-loss team has a shot. Like, that's zero shot to get into the college football playoff from the Big 12 with more than one loss. SEC, you might be able to have three if you're a certain team. Big 12, you can only have one at most. So, yeah, I think the conference race is a little bit tighter than just three teams, although I don't buy Texas Tech as being a contender after Saturday. I don't necessarily believe Cincinnati's good enough to overcome that whole mountain in front of them. Same thing with Colorado. But, yeah, those three separate themselves nationally as the three playoff hopes and the only 3 playoff hopes right now for the Big 12.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I agree, because everyone else who has 2 losses, which is everybody else but those 3, will have to run the table. Is that possible? Yes. Is that still good enough to get in after the losses each of them have? Probably not. In Lubbock on Saturday night or afternoon, for some reason, Dave Aranda and Baylor seemed to play their best games in Lubbock on the road. They absolutely crushed Texas Tech, 59-35, jumped in their business, and there were a couple of times when Baylor earlier this year would have wobbled and maybe broken. At the end of the half, when their lead was cut to 3, they went down and scored. At the start of the third quarter, 3 and out, Taj Brooks gets loose. Really the first time he ever really got loose all night. Had over 100 yards. Next thing you know, Baylor counters that, and next thing you know, there's a muff kick return, and then all hell bent for election as Baylor ends up winning that game. Dave Aranda kept saying, and even a couple of assistant coaches, and even Joey McGuire, if they could ever put 2 halves together, they have a dangerous team. I don't know about dangerous, but they put every phase of the game together in that win. And, man, that's got to be a stunning loss for Texas Tech, Joey McGuire, and that fan base.
To give up 59 points to a team that I didn't think could count to 59, so they didn't know that points happened that way for the last 2 seasons was amazing. And it feels to me like all those touchdowns that Baylor's left on the board got scored in Lubbock on Saturday. Like everything that they left on the board, they did a great job. And now for Baylor, you look down the barrel of the schedule, you've got Oklahoma State, who is in an absolute free fall right now, and things aren't going well. You have TCU, who has been nothing but average at best all year long. You have West Virginia, also in, guess what, a free fall right now. Now, granted, that one's on the road. You've got Houston, who is in year 1 of Willie Fritz and is very rocky, and Kansas, who's probably the first or second most disappointing team in the Big 12.
Yeah, they got a nice win. They needed it, and they got it over the weekend by hammering Houston. So, Craig, your thoughts, how does this change, in your opinion, if it does, Baylor football moving forward?
Well, I don't think they're now just some awesome team that, has unlocked everything. I think that they were highly motivated. I think they played a team that's not nearly as good as the teams they played leading into this. We made a lot of the schedule, and some people would roll their eyes at that of, oh, well, you're just making excuses for Aranda, or, oh, well, it wouldn't matter, this and that. But you look at that schedule, and it's like, all right, I know that's something that you could say, like, oh, well, it doesn't really matter and this and that. They should be winning games regardless. But when you have the stat out there that they're like 19-2, the 3 teams they lost to in the Big 12, like heading into this week, or it's like that. It's like 19-2 or like 1 maybe off. But that's what the record basically is of BYU, of Iowa State, and of Colorado that they played. So, yeah, it would have to be 2, right, because Colorado's got 2 losses. But you played really good teams. Texas Tech was winning games by pretty thin margins and getting pretty fortunate to win some of those close games. So I think you had a team that was probably a little bit inflated on paper record-wise, or was just playing with some pretty extreme circumstances where it really could go either way week to week, and they were ending up on the fortunate side over and over and over again. So maybe that record isn't what you quite thought they were. On the other side, you had a team that was losing those types of games, so their record not quite indicative of who they were. And I think Baylor just played a team that wasn't able to bully them up front like the others were able to do, and wasn't quite as good as the others they played. And with an extra week to prepare and with just a little bit of belief, I think they put on their best effort of the year and were able to flex their muscles on the road. I was not expecting that. If there was a blowout to happen in Lubbock, I was thinking it was going to be Texas Tech delivering it, because I just didn't have faith in Baylor emotionally or mentally to go out there and blow out the Red Raiders, but they did, and a lot of credit to them. And the only thing that really changes for me is I thought they'd probably be 2-4 based on the way things are going. So now they are at 3-4?
3-4.
So I was thinking 2-5. I was thinking they'd be 2-5 after this weekend, but they're 3-4. So all of a sudden you do look up at the rest of that schedule and you go, okay, they played the best teams. They don't play Kansas State. So all that's left are teams that are about who they are or close to who they are. So all those games are winnable. And so, yeah, there's a scenario where you look at that schedule and go like, damn, they could win like 4 or 5 games down the stretch if they play the way they played on Saturday in Lubbock. That's possible. I'm not banking on it, but that's possible, and that's not something I thought we'd be saying.
They're about to wait, like, this part of Baylor's schedule is the wade through mediocrity for everybody involved. I mean, it is, it's a bunch of 3 and 4 teams or 2 and 5s and things like that. So this is where you just beat a team with a winning record, which is the first time that's happened in a long time. So now go beat some teams with some losing records.
Well, they still have a lot of work to be done. These two coaching staffs, when it comes to recruiting, have had there's been some back and forth. There was a note about Baylor when they flipped the a commitment to Baylor, where a man on staff at Texas Tech, James Blanchard, said something about make sure you cash those checks or make sure those checks are cashed. I like James. I've known him for a long time before he even got into the administrative or personnel part of college football. But he did say that, and it was a shot when Baylor flipped a recruit. Aaron Appleberry from Baylor put this up. Check cashed. That was in response to what happened, I think, over the summer or at the end of the summer when Baylor flipped a very highly level player who might not even end up at Baylor. So there was that. David, let me see here. There was one other note from David Marshall. Very seldom played the game. He is a military veteran. This is, we believe in ourselves and our coaching staff. What about you? That was something he put up. What are you looking at me like that for? Did you not see that?
No, I just thought you're just a little bit confused in the way you were introducing that.
He's a player on the Baylor football team that seldom has had a chance to play. No stats under his name. He was in the military, but that was a tweet that I noticed from him. I thought it was unique because I had not heard much about David, but that was David Marshall at his tweet. We believe in ourselves after the win and our coaching staff. What about you? So we'll get more into the Big 12, a little bit deeper into the Big 12 in just a little bit. One note from the Big 12. We mentioned the 3 that are leading the way to possibly get to the college football playoff. Colorado won again. Brandon Marcello had this note. They've now won 3 straight road games in the same season for the first time since 1996. 1996. That was the first year of the Big 12. The 2 road wins by 27-plus points in the same season, the most since 1989 when they were a part of the Big 8, which, of course, changed to the Big 12 in 1996. So Dion and the Buffaloes are kind of hanging around. They got butt whipped by Nebraska in that game earlier. Not sure if they played today, if that would happen at all. That's another story. But your thoughts about the Buffaloes as they have now put themselves at least in the position to be a part of the conversation.
They have. They keep winning, and they're getting better. Still wonder when they're going to figure out how to run the ball, and that's probably a next year thing for them. But, they throttled Arizona. I mean, the Wildcats were never really in that game. So, I come away even more impressed every single week with Shadur Sanders and how good he is. And I know that this is jumping ahead, but I'm very curious to see where he winds up in his professional career, because I think if you put the right kind of talent around him, clearly he's a talented guy who makes other talented guys pop. LaJohntay Wester, who I've talked about a lot since he went there, had a great game. Jimmy Horn Jr. made some big plays. I mean, he makes other guys around him better, and if he winds up in the right situation on the next level, he's going to be great. And that right situation involves giving a running game. He can be really good, really fast. I'm very intrigued by him.
Well, they got a really manageable schedule. Arizona sucks. That's become pretty clear. So they handled them the way that you should beat a team that's not on your level when you're a pretty good team. I think Colorado's a pretty good team. And, I think that if you look at that schedule, there are a bunch of winnable games, but it's pointless to look past this weekend because Cincinnati is a huge game for both teams in the Big 12 standings and in the overall race to try and, get as high as you possibly can. So you're at home, but Brennan Sorsby and Corey Kiner and company ought to be a great challenge. So I'm really looking forward to that game this weekend. I don't think it'll probably get much play nationally because the Big 12 doesn't, period. That was pretty clear in watching coverage over the weekend and listening to people who were forced to talk about it for 30 seconds and clearly wish they were doing anything else Kirk Chris Fowler, for example. But, yeah, I think this is a big game, and people in Big 12 country will very much look forward to this. And this will kind of set the tone for what Colorado can do down the stretch, because I think every game after that's winnable. I think that game's winnable. So you're looking at very possibly a 10-2 season if things fall right.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you said. I was watching a lot of the highlight shows, and it was almost like even Nick Saban went there over the weekend during game day on Saturday morning about how can you sit there and say like a once beaten BYU or K-State or Iowa State is better than a 2 or 3 loss team, and he compared it to Georgia. Well, maybe he's right, but I just think that it's like breathing for the analyst to be able to say that.
Well, and it's the SEC. Like, look, when you're in it, Nick Saban was part of that propaganda machine forever. As much as I respect him and think he's great, like, he's still part of the propaganda machine. So they have that because it's ingrained in them. He had to protect himself for a long time, right? And give those explanations when Alabama teams may not have necessarily been up to stuff in the national eye. So we've set that for so long of this machine that spins and spins and spins, that the SEC also feels like they don't have to earn it as much as the other conferences do, that they get more mulligans because of that. But you're also gatekeeping in a way that prevents them from, ever getting those advantages on you. So, like, some of those things that people need to call it and be like, look, they went through their schedule. They won these games. You didn't. I mean, sorry that you have a tougher schedule, but you also won't play them. So what are we talking about here?
Yeah, the best case scenario for the Big 12 is still for Iowa State, BYU to win out. I've seen, well, what about K-State? Well, K-State is going to have to play Iowa State. So I think you are looking at them taking their second loss, and you'd prefer Iowa State to be unbeaten, to play an unbeaten BYU. You're already seeing them try to set up the table to leave out one of those two teams if that were to be the case. Although they're not getting into specifics, just the way the table's being set, seeing the rankings the way that they're being shuffled week to week, and seeing how some losses are treated compared to others, and just seeing the obvious just not caring about the Big 12 and the voices of some of these broadcasts. It's pretty clear how ESPN feels. And so, again, I'll say what I've said throughout all this realignment junk and everything else that's been some crisis of identity for Big 12 schools, that the only thing you can do is keep winning, and make it to where it's 2 undefeated teams in Arlington playing each other, rather than one takes a loss before you get there, and then you have a reason. Oh, well, they've got one loss, like they're definitely out because they're not as good as this one-loss team from the SEC or from the Big Ten. So you need to be as good as you possibly can be, and again, it's all about winning games, because definitely you're not going to get the benefit of the doubt nationally. I don't even know how many of those guys are watching your product, to be perfectly honest, based on some of the commentary that I heard over the weekend. So that's a problem, and it's a problem that's only solved by winning. And so that's what Iowa State, BYU, and Kansas State have to keep doing. Beyond that, they're not looking at having any opportunities. So we'll see how that goes these next few weeks.
And then there was the game in Austin, speaking of the SEC. Here is a note from Max Olson. Georgia's defense in that game against Texas, despite that it got hairy for Georgia in the second half, at 23-15, had 12 stops on third downs. They had 4 stops on fourth downs against an offense that is very prolific. Here's another note. This is not on a graphic or anything. Georgia sacked Texas quarterback 7 times, had 10 tackles behind the line of scrimmage. Texas defense played well enough for UT to win the game, but UT had 259 yards of offense, 29 yards rushing. Now, some of that, of course, is also the sacks of Ewers and getting to the quarterback, but they were 2 of 14 on third down and 1 of 5 on fourth down in that game. And even then, there was a little bit of a glimmer of hope when they scored to cut the lead to 23-15. Kirby Smart. He is the master of this now. We said this last week. Nobody believes in us. In the post-game interview, he said that. Nobody gave us a chance. Your whole network doubted us. Nobody believed us. And then they tried to rob us with the calls in this place. And that's another story, is all of that and the craziness of the bottles. Craig, your thoughts is, we said last week that Kirby Smart would probably get his team so frothed up to the mouth that they would they would just play with like crazy fire coming out of their ears.
Yeah, I think that they played a really good game and was really impressed with the way Georgia showed up, was really impressed with how their edge guys really impacted that game. Was not impressed by their quarterback play. Like, talk about one of the most overrated players in America, I feel like, every time I watch him. But nevertheless, fortunately, the quarterback play on the other side wasn't that great, in large part due to your defense. And you got that early lead, and despite a call going against you ultimately, which I have mixed feelings on, as we'll get to, I think that it was an amazing win. It was a banner signature win. It was a welcome to the SEC for the Texas, as far as the pageantry and the big game, and also taking your loss when everybody's been putting you on the throne here these last few weeks. So it was a little bit of a reality check for them. Doesn't really hurt either one in the long run, because they're still both top 5. They're still both playoff teams, and I think even Texas losing a second game, unless it was a blowout, they're still in the playoff. And it's hard to see them losing more than one more game, if even one more game. For Georgia, you're obviously sitting pretty, and there's very much a possibility we see these two play again, either in the SEC championship game or in the playoff, or both. And that's when we'll have the conversation about whether the expanded playoff sucks because some team meets for like a third time. But I don't know. Based on the first one, those games will probably be pretty electric as well, no matter where they are. But, yeah, Georgia was clearly the better team on Saturday. I don't think Texas played their best, but Georgia had something to do with that.
We don't mind it when teams play a third time in the NFL, do we? I mean, we'll get used to it. I mean, I know, like, for college it sucks because there's more teams than the NFL.
I think it depends on how you get there.
Yeah, it depends how you get there. But, if
you play in the regular season like Georgia, Texas, or whoever, and then you play in the conference championship, and you're both good enough to then play in the quarter, semis, or championship game, is going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to happen. So, and look, the SEC wants it that way. But, yeah, look,
and the TV networks.
And TV networks. Look, that's
they'd rather have Georgia, Texas 3 than Boise or anybody from the Big 12 or anybody not named Florida State or Clemson from the ACC.
Well, I think they'll get excited about Miami
when they get
asterisk one more team added in there. Yeah.
If we ever get Mac again at the rest of the year, once they get through the college football playoffs, and I know they have a spokesman, so probably not. There's no one that will convince me otherwise, either prior to now or in the future, that they don't look at the bracket, even though one team should be ranked 5th and another one should be 8th, that they won't get people on opposite sides to play each other 2 or 3 games down the road rather than right off the top. They're going to do that, and that's fine. That's why the NFL is perfect. You play, you have a division, that's who you play. The schedules have the parity. The good teams have to play a tougher schedule. The bad teams don't. And eventually you get to the playoffs no matter what because of division champions or a wild card, and you let it rip. It's a bracket. You let it rip.
And by the way, I'm not necessarily complaining, even though I can see where they do this and the networks do this. And I'm just like addressing reality. Like, that's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so I'm not even complaining like they're screwing the Big 12. Like, yeah, they kind of are, and possibly others as well. But I'm just saying that matter-of-factly because that's just the facts. That's the perception. It's clear by the polls. It's clear by the way guys talk during broadcasts and how differently they talk about certain teams over on this side versus they talk about teams over there that you feel like they're obligated to have to talk about for 30 seconds, and even then that's too much. Like, I definitely walked away with those vibes this weekend. So it is what it is. But, yeah, I'm just going to call it what it is, and you're definitely fighting a perception battle right now.
All right, the 15-point loss by Texas at home was the largest loss by a number 1 team at home since 1982's Dan Marino. I couldn't believe this stat. Now, number 1 teams have been knocked out before when they're on the road, but it was a home game. And this is even hard to imagine that somebody didn't go into somewhere and, beat them 30-10 or 30-15. But it's the largest home loss by a number 1 team since Dan Marino in Pittsburgh lost in a game at home. And then, of course, the next year went on to be everything in the NFL in 1983. And then there was all of the interruption of the game, the pass interference call, which was the wrong call, the delay because of water bottles when they started to show the replays. And it just seemed like it was never going to end. Sark has to go on the field. He has to calm everybody down. Even though it was a bad call, and in the end they got the call right, It was very squirrely how that changed. That's another part of the story. But UT penalized $250,000. But here's the part that I just don't know how they're going to do this. That they will use surveillance cameras, TV cameras, the network cameras, everything cameras, security cameras, and try to get some sort of facial recognition with anybody that threw anything on the field. And if that happens and they can prove it, then you will be banned from anything the rest of this particular school year, this calendar year. What if there were 300 or 400 people that did that? Now, you may say they can't find that news, right? They can't find that information. Put up the photo, Garrett, and then we'll get into the story itself. This is from 2021. Tennessee lost at home to Ole Miss. Remember this story? And Lane Kiffin got hit by a golf ball. This was the follow-up story. The same almost word-for-word statement was issued by Greg Sankey to Tennessee. In the end, they banned 16 students and 9 others from sports for throwing trash at Neyland Stadium.
Hey, 25 out of what you know.
Tennessee was really bad too.
Yeah. 25. That's a pretty good roundup there. But
okay, wait a minute. Go back to the picture. Hold on, Garrett. Go up to that picture. We had the photo. Look at how many water bottles are on the field right there. That's 50 right there alone.
Well, that was a good 15, 20-minute delay, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
it was a long time. It was like a stretcher delay, like that kind of a thing. It took that long. Now, to the actual functionality of what happened in that call, I found it distressing in 2 ways. One, look, the call was wrong, and that's bad enough, but there's bad calls in games. 2, the optics of it you cannot get out of because they didn't change the call before the trash got thrown on the field. They changed it after. So there's going to be a large section of the viewing populace that believes that the refs changed it because of the reaction from the crowd, and whether they did or not, that's not a good look. They did not follow that sequence really well. Sure, they got the call right, but at what cost? That's where we need to reform college officiating. It needs to all come under one umbrella, no conference officials, really get it better, use all the technology at your grasp, and make them somewhat accountable for what they do. I think they should have some cushion from the outside world because people are irrational and crazy. But bottom line is, you had an optic moment there in the SEC that you're not going to get past for a little bit.
Well, my main thought was that I prefer talking about this way than had they upheld the call, because all we would be talking about is how Texas got screwed. That's all anybody would be talking about.
Yeah, that would be part of it. Yeah, no question.
No matter if Georgia won by 4, you'd be like, yep, but just because Texas got screwed on that call, they had a chance to grab momentum, and then the refs screwed them over, and Georgia went down and scored and blew it open, and there would have been a big old asterisk next to that game if they wouldn't have reversed that call. So from that standpoint, I'm glad that they did it for that sole reason, because it eliminates any of the, or we just, if it wasn't for that, or, whatever, because if Georgia had won by 60 after that call, people would still point to that call as being the reason as to why, even if it really wasn't, right? So for that reason, I'm glad we're not talking about Texas getting screwed over today, because I just felt that as soon as that happened, and I was like, man, we're going to have to talk about that for the rest of this season. Fortunately, we don't, but this was, bad in its own right. I think that was total BS, them changing the call in the fashion that they did. I have no doubts about it in my mind that they saw the replay, that they felt the heat from the crowd, and I'm not so sure that they didn't get a phone call, a little buzz from upstairs saying, guys, I wouldn't rule that out either.
I think that needs to.
You mean from the officials' booth?
From Greg Sankey. No. I'm telling you though, if you're already the puppet master, but I think whoever is in charge of that moment, they're looking at the disaster that was awaiting them with that call right there, and I do think I'm not saying that he did that, but I'm not putting it past anybody that it wasn't just the official on his own going, oh, look at that big screen.
Oh, no,
guys,
I can see that.
I think I would not be surprised if somebody from upstairs was like, guys, Why not?
No, I'm not. I agree. I'm
because
not
the alternative
saying
is they
you're
just
wrong.
sat there.
I would not be surprised if somebody intervened.
I believe that they did, because I believe that they looked at what was about to happen and how disastrous that was going to look, of this whole game, this big game that's been built up, and it's going to get ruined halfway through by this call, right? And there's going to be this asterisk. So that was all that was in my mind, was somebody up in the booth was like, guys, y'all need to look at this again and maybe change it, or whatever was said. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I wouldn't put it past. I'm not putting anything past anything in college football. I'm just not. So
and the stoppage with the delay allowed them to have more time to think through it, right?
I think they averted a disaster, because that game was going to be marred by that call. Because even, like I said, if Georgia won by 60, the whole conversation was going to be about that call and how it changed the game. And so all I had in my mind after that was they cleaned up a bigger mess and created a different one, but it's a better mess to clean up than having the whole game just not count.
In the end, did they get the call right?
They got the call right.
But that crew should not do a game for a week.
Oh, I agree with that. There should be some sort of penalty.
They rarely will mention that, but they lost control of the game. Not just with that one. It just seemed like there was a lot of delays, targeting, et cetera. That's part of the game.
But
that's another story.
I will say this. The Sky Judge thing, like, they call it accelerated replay in the NFL, which I think is they're just saying, well, no, there's not a Sky Judge. But if you watched any of the UFL this year, and Dean Blandino, basically the referee, they put it on the air, they're very open about it, and he's like, hey, I've got a complete pass at the 42-yard line. Here's what happened. Or, hey, pick up that holding call. It wasn't holding. And then they pick it up and wave it off, and nobody in the stands is the wiser. We are watching on TV, but nobody in the stands is the wiser. You don't have to worry about it. There's all this, there's transparency to it. There's accountability. The technology exists. They can afford it, because that's the other thing about instant replay and all this for forever. They're like, well, we can't afford it. We can't afford it. All the games are on TV. You have cameras. You can afford it. You can also afford another official up in the booth going, hey, Tim, that was a face mask. Those things can also happen.
Georgia had multiple targeting calls, and the one when an offensive player lowers their head always just gets me a little bit confused. But they had some targeting calls. They had 2 to 3 or 4 face mask calls, and then they also, of course, that bad pass interference call that was overruled. The delay, and then when he came back on the speaker and made that call, that referee, I was like, excuse me, you're shitting me, right? I mean, this is really not happening. I'm not complaining because the right call was made, but that was awfully sketchy, shady, and I'm not even pointing at UT. I'm just saying it was weird.
Well, UT's fault, if anything, it'd be SEC's fault.
There you go.
So, and you know what? Now you're not going to be able to shake people feeling like Texas is already running the conference based on something like that. At first you go, no, they're not going to roll in here. That was a Texas moment right there, was them getting the benefit of that call, and it's not their fault. But that is going to have people from now on, every time they get the benefit of the doubt, going, see, it's that Texas, Texas.
Yeah, I get that. And if that would have been a Big 12 game, but they're not going to be able to, ramrod Georgia, Alabama, LSU, Florida. But that makes you wonder.
In that moment, it felt like it.
Yeah, it did.
In that moment, it absolutely felt like they were getting that treatment, because it was a call that should never have been overturned based on the fact that they shouldn't have had 5 minutes to sit there and change their mind. I mean, that was unlike anything we ever see in college football. As bad as officiating can get, we don't see that type of a situation hardly if ever. I can't think of a comparison. There probably is one from some sicko out there who can cite a game where something similar like that happened. But for me, like that, I was gobsmacked by that. And it felt like, man, if you're a conspiracy theorist, you can definitely have your field day with this one, because that's unbelievable that they just reversed that call, even if it was the right call. So, yeah, there's going to be that sentiment that lasts around that decision. But I do think they much rather would clean up this mess than the one that they were setting themselves up for if they had not overturned that call.
Paul is saying that what you're saying is they made the better bad choice. We would have never heard the end of it. And
what would the conversation be today? It'd be all about how Texas got screwed by that call. It changed the whole dynamic of the game. That's what I was saying. Even if Georgia had gone on to win by 60, you still would have been like, yeah, but that turning point was when the game was close and Texas should have had the ball. And that's all we'd be talking about.
All right, Steve Sarkisian today met with the media as Texas now moves on to play, which is hard and great to say, 25th ranked Vanderbilt. Sarkisian, here's a quote from today's press conference. From here on out, we're in an SEC championship game. Remember, there are no divisions. It's everybody plays to get to be whoever's number 1 and 2 based on possible tiebreakers too. And last year, they lost a game in October to Oklahoma, then ran the table, had a couple of near bumps in the road, but they won, and they survived. And so using that as an example for what the Horns need to do if they want to get another chance at Georgia, maybe in what would be the SEC championship game.
Yeah, and I know we want to move on, but one other thing that was mentioned today was I guess the SEC has threatened to cut off alcohol sales. I don't know how exactly that works, but
they said they said they would not, but they want to get the report back from Texas. Yeah,
they're threatening that they will if they have to at some point in time. If that behavior were to continue, and just in the last half hour, the Minister of Culture, Matthew McConaughey, has put out a statement on Twitter basically telling UT fans, like, hey, great home field advantage, but let's cut out the bottle throwing, and next time, like when Florida comes to town, let's be better about that. So they're doing damage control, and they need to because that was an ugly look. But I think it's a rallying thing for them at this point, so you'll see a massive crowd, just less bottle throwing the next time around. Although everybody was answering the same question. Did this just teach people that if you throw bottles that you can get a call overturned? It absolutely was showing people that on Saturday night, so they got to handle that next time.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. Although in Texas, look, if the guy who once got arrested for playing bongos naked in his backyard is telling you, like, guys, we need to calm him down.
Yeah.
Like,
if they would have drug tested him on the sideline. Now, again, he's a great part of that atmosphere. Paxton, no one's taking my alcohol. And Sandra Green, the horns are the root of all evil. Sandra, you're brilliant. You are absolutely brilliant. Payson, alcohol sales at the football game from Payson Cougar fan. BYU, not any there at Provo.
I don't need it
there at Provo. It's just
high on life.
It's unfortunate. Otherwise, a great matchup. And I watched every second of it. Had a couple of things that popped up, including when I saw the pass interference, guys, he must have been grabbing him. No, it was a bad call. It was a bad call. In the end, they got it right. The delay and all the disruption was crazy, but it was interesting how all that went down. Texas scored, got it to within 8, and then all of a sudden, of course, we know what happened in the end. When Georgia had to go, 90 yards? A 3rd and 10 or 12 and converted, and then went 90 yards when the game was really on the line. They took care of their business. We will get to various coaching changes, head coaching and coordinators in another segment coming up. Ari Temkin will join us from Big 12 Radio on TuneIn, along with, we'll look at the top 25. There are some college football top 25 bangers, the Big 12 schedule this week, and, man, a lot more to get to before it is all said and done. But coming up, Ari Temkin, Big 12 Radio on TuneIn. He is next, and this is 365 Sports. PettyClinicalOT.com. Dr. Ken Petty can help you become the high-performance man you want to be, need to be, and used to be. When I was on my way over here to the studio, I was listening to a radio station out of Dallas for about the 8 to 12-minute drive. And during that time, I heard 2 testosterone-based commercials. Low testosterone for men. You get to be 35 or 40. Sometimes it might take even longer than that. Father Time can take over parts of what happens within your body. Heck, sometimes even what's outside of your body. But Dr. Petty can help you get better energy, stop being lethargic and feel like every day is a beatdown. You sleep better. Your sex drive is better. If any of those are the symptoms, 1 out of every 3 or 4 men have low testosterone, and symptoms of that, including the ones I just mentioned. Dr. Kent Petty can help you out. Contact them. Tell him I sent you. He will set you up to get your blood work. Take care of that for you. Get the results and then get in contact with you and let you know what your testosterone level is. Maybe it's fine, but if it is too low, he can give you an option to increase your testosterone level so you can become the high-performance man you want to be, need to be, and used to be at PettyClinicalOT.com.
The Jeep Adventure Days closeout at Allen Samuels just got bigger and better than ever with $15,000 off a 2024 Jeep Grand Cherokee Overland Demo with a V8 Hemi. Or how about a 2023 Dodge Charger RT with $15,000 off? or a Charger Scat Pack with $11,000 off. Ask about the hot deals on the 2024 Wagoneers and get 3.9% for 72 months. Only at Allen Samuels in Waco.
Come by. Let's be friends.
In Texas, there's pea-size hail and baseball-size hail. Guess which one hit our house? We didn't even know where to begin, but we called our Texas Farm Bureau insurance agent, and he was so reassuring. He knew exactly what to do to get our house back into shape and our lives back to normal. Now, we're even more thankful for the roof over our heads.
Stop by and see our agents at one of our 3 McLennan County locations.
Coverage and discounts are subject to qualifications and policy terms and may vary by situation.
Ghost Hydration is a fully transparent, fully loaded, full-flavored hydration drink that we've all been waiting for. Ghost is caffeine-free with electrolytes, 0 sugar, and low sodium that'll hydrate your body before, during, and after your workout. Consumer loved with authentic flavors, so grab and enjoy a Sour Patch Kids Blue Raspberry and Red Berry, along with the Kiwi Strawberry, Orange Squeeze, or Lemon Lime. Ghost Hydration can truly be used anytime. Remember, it's formulated for sports, but made for life.
At Ideal MRI, we feel blessed to be part of the Waco community. We're a small family business here in Central Texas. At times like this, the cost of healthcare has never been more important. And unfortunately, significant illnesses and injuries still occur. And that's why Ideal MRI is open and here to serve you through this difficult time. So if you need an MRI, ask your doctor about Ideal MRI. You can schedule online in minutes at idealmri.com or call 833-IDEAL-MRI.
When you work with a bank, you should expect the best of everything. That includes face-to-face personal service and the kind of community banking care that only comes from one neighbor to another. That's exactly what you'll get from the First National Bank of Central Texas, where you will know your banker works just as hard as you do. Once again, that's the First National Bank of Central Texas. Settle for nothing less than the first. Member FDIC.
This is 365 Sports.
The 3 o'clock hour is sponsored by Waco Custom Marketplace. Meats, sweets, Texas treats, and a cut above the rest. 425 Lake Air Drive, Waco.
Ari Temkin, Big 12 Radio on TuneIn, joins us on 365 Sports. He's in Kansas City, Big 12 men's and women's basketball media day this week, and he's up there for that. How you doing? Hotel room all comfortable and everything?
Yeah, just got in. Just doing a little bit of research here on Big 12 women's hoops, and actually was on B. So I've made my way to Baylor. Just getting started clearly with my my women's.
So Arizona State,
Baylor. Yeah.
Okay.
Colorado's next, by the way. I think. I don't know.
BYU.
No, BYU Cincinnati. BYU Cincinnati.
There's so many teams in this conference. I don't know how this happened. In the middle of football season to do this, it's cruel.
No, it really is. And you are doing God's work for us. Thank you for being there. So, Iowa State and BYU find a way in the last few seconds to stay alive overall nationally and also for the Big 12 title. K-State takes care of their business. Cincinnati and the others have a loss. Cincinnati. Your thoughts about where we are after this weekend? Because Tech obviously was somewhat fraudulent with what happened at home against Baylor.
I mean, you got to start there, right? How about Sawyer Robertson and the Baylor Bears? And, when you look at the one-win Big 12 teams right now, nobody is playing better than Baylor, just based on obviously how they played this week. But, Sawyer Robertson, this is nothing new. We've been talking about him weekly and how good he's been. But the 5 touchdown passes, it was this game was 24-21 Baylor early in the third quarter, and then Baylor outscored them by 28. Just 28 unanswered. Touchdown. So, obviously we saw a lot of Sawyer with his ability to run and use his legs, but he's a one-man wrecking crew, man. And when we consider where this team was when the season started with the quarterback position to where it is today, it's remarkable. But yeah, it was sort of funny. There were 4 games in the Big 12, like the 2 games featuring the 2 undefeated teams, that identical final scores, both came down to drives where the team that was hoping to stay on as undefeated scored to get to 38, win the game. And then similarly to the Baylor Texas Tech game was the West Virginia K-State game, where it was close until it was not very close, and then it was decidedly not close. And so I think, both of those games were basically identical sort of games from the Big 12 this weekend.
Ari, why can't UCF and West Virginia in particular, I'm leaving Oklahoma State out of this because they're kind of a different situation, but why can't those two teams that seemingly have a lot of good things going for them get out of their own way?
Yeah, great question. UCF, after 3 weeks, Paul, looked like certainly a team that wasn't going to be competing towards the top of the conference. They had the best running game going, and going into that Colorado game, I mean, that was really a line of demarcation for them where it looked like on national TV at the Bounce House, they could really make a statement against a Colorado defense that had not been great stopping the run. And obviously we know Colorado couldn't run the football. And I mean, Colorado just took it to UCF on the ground on both sides of the football. And it was like, since then, they've just been a mess, and it's Gus Malzahn's a hell of a head coach historically. And there's no reason to think he's not still a good coach, but there's something going on in that locker room. You had a bunch of players that, seemingly quit on the team, and then another player that called them out for doing so. Good for him for calling them out. But I mean, it's just it seems like there's a lot beneath the surface there at UCF that, and look, this past game, they look pretty good. I mean, they played, they did about as much as any team has done against Iowa State's defense this week. So, but I think the change to Ja'Cory Brown was huge. KJ Jefferson, tons of expectations for him in the offseason, and he just hadn't met them. I mean, he just was not very good this year. So they make the switch, and obviously when you do that, you're going to go through some growing pains, especially with a sort of an inexperienced quarterback, and they were rotating him with another guy the previous week. So, in terms of UCF and then West Virginia, I mean, I think it's now, I want to say it's like 6 consecutive losses for Neil Brown against top 25 teams. His record overall at West Virginia against top 25 teams is horrendous. I think for a guy that was very much on the hot seat last year for a team that won 9 games, it's hard for him not to find himself back on that hot seat. I think there's some apathy, it seems like, from West Virginia, like here we go again with Neil Brown. I'm a big Neil Brown fan, but the comments he made this week, even if they were sort of innocuous and maybe taken, larger than they should have been, just not the greatest optics of it in terms of like, how do you show up and have fun and party and whatever, probably not the greatest comment. So, and then on top of that, I mean, Garrett Green, he's sort of a 55% throat passer. So, it's hard to be really successful and consistent at quarterback when most of his game is the ability to run, and he's just not completing passes at a high enough clip. And then he left this game with injury. I mean, Neil Brown would complain about injuries, and certainly those are there, but everybody deals with them.
K-State, BYU, Iowa State, they seem to be kind of the class of the league right now, or the ones that have the best shot as potential champions and playoff teams. Obviously, not all 3 will get that opportunity, and maybe not 2 based on how the league's talked about nationally at the moment. But does it feel like those 3 are in a tier by themselves to you, or does a Cincinnati and a Colorado also maybe have a little chaos in store as well?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Craig. I mean, I would put them there. I mean, I think if the season ended today, like the Big 12 should have at least 2 playoff teams. Again, I spent time this morning on the AP Top 25, which again, just it's absolutely befuddling. These people need to stay up and watch games. I mean, it's remarkable that Clemson is somehow still in the top 10. I know they keep winning. They haven't played anybody. Their next good win is their first good win. It's insane to me when you look at all 3 of those teams have some of the best, I think, top 15 strength of schedule. Clemson nowhere to be found there. It's like a birthright. The fact that there are 6 one-loss teams in front of the 2 undefeated Big 12 teams is a slap in the face, and it's ridiculous. And tomorrow when I interview Brett Yormark, I'm going to ask him how that gets changed, because it's a joke. I mean, their strength of schedule is so much better than a lot of these teams, and they're looking up at them in the standings. They should just be ranking recruiting rankings. If that's what we're going to do, just rank the teams based on their recruiting rankings, and we can move on with our lives. We should do that every week. Who has the best recruitings? That recruiting rankings, let's just list those in the top 25 every single week. That's what we should do. Let's just do that instead of playing the games and then watching the games and then reacting to them, because that's clearly not what's happening here. It's ridiculous. So yeah, I mean, Kansas State absolutely is in that upper echelon with the 2 undefeated teams, which look, I mean, this is what happens in college football as you go through an undefeated record. The good news is I don't think either of these teams need to be undefeated to get playoff spots. But I mean, they're flying close to the sun. Their flaws are out there for everybody to see every week. You're getting everybody's best shot. It's tough to keep winning. And that's what we're going to see every week. You're going to look at the schedule and see games that are off games, seemingly for these undefeated teams. And as we saw this weekend, like, they're going to continue to play close games because it's just tough. It's real tough when you've got that target and people are zeroing in on the things you don't do well. I probably would. I mean, you mentioned Colorado and Cincinnati, and I think that's fair. And look, Sorsby is probably the most underrated quarterback in the country this year. But with Shadur, I mean, it's undoubtable what he's doing. He's insanely good, and they're finding ways to protect him better. I mean, if you were to look at who was sacked 7 times and who was sacked 1 time, you never would have thought it would have been Shadur that was sacked once and Noah Fafita that was sacked 7 times. So they're protecting him better. He's also getting it done now with less weapons as guys are dealing with health issues. Travis Hunter is not playing as much, and Horn is missing time. So Wester now becomes more of a factor. Will Shepard becomes more of a factor. So it's hard to Colorado's got to be there too, because they have a legitimate NFL quarterback who is, he's playing at that level.
Yeah, no, he really is. BYU plays at UCF, who had what looked like one of those. It was going to be a huge win for them, and they couldn't finish. They ran. How many yards did Harvey end up with? Like 220, something like that. And they had another long run as well. So they just can't put two halves together. Baylor couldn't do it until they went to Lubbock for whatever reason. That's their magic potion. What are your thoughts about BYU now on the road across the country on the East Coast, and a game that you think that they should just eventually, like a boa constrictor, take care of the game? But your thoughts about that game on the road?
Yeah, I mean, and look, BYU, having covered this conference as long as we have, Smokey, I mean, we've seen how many times we've seen a Mike Gundy team do something like that. I mean, go into the bye week, completely redesign your offense. My feeling is, and look, I mean, BYU fans don't want to hear this, but if Garrett Rangel doesn't get hurt, I would love to see how that game ends up, because the quarterback run was working very effectively. Obviously, with Rangel, you get a much better look with that than you do with Bowman. So I think, having to go back to Bowman because the injury to Rangel, really hurt their ability to consistently play that quarterback run game. But that's just what team. And look, I mean, the fact that Gundy had the bye week, so you can kind of install some new things. I mean, it was a lot of short passes, but this is what teams are now doing. They're trying to game plan to make sure that they're trying to figure out a way to beat you. And I mean, Oklahoma State, after losing to West Virginia, it looked like they had no shot to win any Big 12 games moving forward. And they had the undefeated BYU Cougars on the ropes in their building at night. So yeah, I mean, the time zone travel thing is definitely a factor. And look, everybody's dealing with it and managing it differently. Arizona State had this thing last week about, Kenny Dillingham kind of moved meetings up. It was almost like a Jason Garrett-esque thing. If you guys remember that Garrett used to during Thanksgiving week, and then the week after he would his days were all mixed up. So it'd be like a Monday, he thought of it as a Wednesday. So Dillingham tried to do a little bit of that with, move meetings up from times to make it early. And then they got out there early. They traveled early to try to account for that. And obviously, they still lost the football game by 10 points. So I think there's probably a million ways to try to do it and manage it, but it's difficult. And it's just part of playing in this new world of college athletics. Obviously, it's a much larger thing that's happening in the Big Ten. I mean, USC and Rutgers are going to play Friday night, the same day as game 1 of the World Series, the same day the Lakers play the second game of the regular season against the Suns in LA on Friday. So that should be interesting too. So it's just, it's just the way of the world now.
TCU beat Utah 13-7. I don't think that means Andy Avalos' defense has all of a sudden found their spirit. Utah clearly going through it with Andy Ludwig leaving, Cameron Rising not being there. What are we to make of TCU going forward? This week they host Tech, and they're already 7-point favorites in that game.
Yeah, I mean, that one is a bizarre line, is it not, given where these two teams were a week ago? That's one that makes you think. TCU is just they're kind of an enigma. I mean, as soon as you think you've got them figured out, they go and do this. Now, this is the game that Andy Ludwig loses his job essentially. And, so how much do you blame what TCU did defensively on what Utah, was doing or wasn't doing, whether it comes to Ludwig or, or Isaac Wilson? They're breaking in a true freshman quarterback that has looked in games a lot better this year than he looked in this game. So I mean, I'd certainly give some credit to TCU defensively. Hopefully for their sake, they figured some things out defensively. Because that was an absolute disaster on the defensive end. And I mean, look, this is part of the season where we think we've got things figured out, and and then Baylor absolutely destroys Texas Tech, and now it looks like it could be a juggernaut on offense. So you kind of throw your arms up and think, one game is an anomaly, a 3-game thing is a trend, and so you want to make sure you're looking through to, over the course of what's happening by these teams over these games. And like, okay, is this an anomaly or is this something that we can count on being a trend? The TCU passing offense has been the most underrated aspect of the big, probably any team in the Big 12. And this was a weird one because it felt like TCU was absolutely dominating the game. And then Isaac Wilson hit a 70-yard touchdown pass. And it was like early in the third quarter, I was like, oh no. I mean, Utah could very well win this game. So the fact that they hung on basically the entire third and fourth quarter to do that defensively, I think speaks to maybe something breaking through on the defensive end. But yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to look a few weeks ahead. I mean, we know what this Texas Tech offense is capable of. Obviously, they didn't show it very well at home on Saturday against Baylor. So let's see if TCU can kind of take a page out of what what Dave Aranda did to Tech's offense, and and see if they can't duplicate that this week against Tech.
How does it feel to see your Jayhawks get a win, and knowing especially what they've got lying ahead of them, which is one of the tougher schedules in the entire country? Yeah,
I mean, playing their best football of the season with their first win since beating Lindenwood the first week of the season. Look, I said it last week kind of as a joke, but it was the truth. I mean, they're the best 1-5 team ever, considering they had lost 5 straight games, or 4 of their 5 by 6 points or less. It was turnovers, it was end of halves, end of games that were a disaster. And it's funny because in this game against Houston, it looked like they were going to hit us the same sort of point where, like, man, they were rolling on offense. It was 28-7, and then suddenly their offense goes 3 and out. They give the ball back to Houston, and looked like Houston could drive, and it's like, oh, it's happening again. They're going to cut the lead in half and take this momentum into the second half. But they play their best game of the year. I mean, I thought before the bye, against Arizona State, the Jalen Daniels had played his best game of the season by far, and this game obviously was that. I mean, if Sawyer Robertson wasn't the player of the week this week in the Big 12, it was going to be Jalen Daniels. So he played very well, and so with that, Kansas is capable of potentially beating K-State. With that being said, they've lost 15 straight. So as a Kansas fan, I'm now obligated to tell you that Kansas still dominates Kansas State in basketball, even though that has nothing to do with the game on Saturday. But it's literally all I have, since they've lost 15 straight to their in-state rivals. And I think 27 of 30, man, Bill Snyder absolutely dominated them. And Chris Klein has done the same. It was basically only Ron Prince that did not. Nobody, it's funny because as good as Kansas may be playing right now, all joking aside, Kansas State's playing phenomenally. And I mean, when you look at what West Virginia tried to do, they basically said, we want Avery Johnson to beat us with his arm. And did Avery Johnson beat them with his arm? I mean, they choked out DJ Giddens. He didn't really have much in terms of the run game. They did not allow Avery Johnson to run the football, and it didn't matter. So they still absolutely got dominated. I don't know how you defend at this point what's become a much better and more consistent passing offense for K-State. Early in the year, it was definitely a work in progress. I think we're starting to see that work pay off, and they're starting to emerge from a passing game situation. I go back to what Craig was talking about in terms of that top tier. Right now, I mean, K-State, I know they have the loss, but man, they look unbeatable comparatively, especially with what we just saw from Iowa State and BYU.
Yeah, if he throws the ball efficiently, sometimes maybe even better than that, efficiently, they're going to be hard to beat.
Ari, what do you see as the short-term future once the offseason hits for Kansas, given they haven't played a game in their stadium this year and they won't. So that's kind of even though it's not far away, it's still wonky. And Lance Leipold might be out there, might not be. What do you think?
What do you mean with Lance? You think like his job security? Or
No. I think somebody's going to try to go get hey, you had a down year at Kansas. You'll never have a down year here, kind of a thing.
But that's why that program would be looking for him, because they had a down.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fair. And look, I mean, he was critical of, I mean, there was less than 40,000 at Arrowhead on Saturday. And so, I mean, like that's part of this, right? I mean, Lance Leipold demands that Kansas fans show up and support the football team. And that shouldn't be a short demand. Like I'm on his side. I should have been at the game on Saturday. I should be supporting him in the same way. So, I mean, he's 100% right. And he's going to be sought after by programs, maybe not after this year, but certainly moving forward with what I think of him. I mean, look, the offense has been a mess at times this year. It's trying to figure itself out, and they've had the year to do it. And I thought they would have a down year this year. I didn't think they'd be this down. I still thought, they'd probably be a bowl team, and they're going to have to fight in order to do that. But yeah, I mean, they've got the brand new stadium coming. I think there's a lot of excitement that could be building. They've recruited at a much higher level. I'd be shocked if Leipold left after this year. And yeah, I mean, he's right to demand, better crowds, more people continue to support the team. I couldn't agree more.
Ari, thanks for finding a way to get there in time, to get to the hotel and get on the video link so we could see you today, man. Thanks for your time. Enjoy Kansas City. I know you will.
Oh, basketball is going to be here, boys. Who's going to win the national title this year? Baylor or Kansas?
Damn, I mean, the Big 12 just needs more teams to get deeper in the tournament, man. Well, Kansas is favored. They're the highest ranked team and favored to win the conference. But will be a dogfight, no question. Ari Temkin, Big 12 Radio on TuneIn Radio. We appreciate his time. Mark Schipper, college football, the fifth down. Are you leaving a voicemail? All right, then let's break. Take a break here, Garrett. We'll break. We'll come back with Mark Schipper on a lot of things college football. This is 365 Sports. The Baylor Club, homecoming week for Baylor at McLean Stadium on Saturday afternoon against Oklahoma State. And Mike Mosel and that entire group that runs the facility inside McLean Stadium is ready for you. Great chance for you to get new memberships available. Unbelievable food, cuisine, the chefs, and more. Special events, special tasting events available. And on game day, the Baylor Club opens up for you to be able to enjoy the food and also the atmosphere of Baylor and Oklahoma State. Inside McLean Stadium with views of inside the stadium itself on game day and elsewhere and other times, and even the video and the view of Foster Pavilion across I-35. The Baylor Club inside McLean Stadium, ready for homecoming this Saturday afternoon. Mark Schipper is with us. He is, I really love his feed. If you haven't seen it, Fifth Down College Football joins us, Craig and Paul, David Smoak on 365 Sports. Mark, tell everybody what you do. You have a newsletter and much, much more. And I thought I saw where you might be writing a book. Is that correct?
Yeah, what's going on, guys? How are you doing? Thanks for having me on. I am indeed writing a book on college football. It's the intersections of college football with American history and culture. I argue that college football is inseparable from American history and culture in very unique ways. And so I made a big odyssey across the country. I went to many of the sport's best rivalries, best stadiums, visited campuses, and just did a big of the history of this game and American history. And I'm putting that together in sort of a big travel odyssey book. And for people who love college football, I have no doubt they'll love this story and learning about where this sport came from and kind of why we love it so much.
What is going to be the name of the book? Sorry, Paul.
Well, the title is not fully settled. It's going to be out this spring, but the one I'm looking at, the one I'm feeling right now is American Odyssey, and we'll have a subtitle below that.
Okay.
Mark, you are speaking my language personally. These are all things that I love: travel, history, and college football. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff on your site where you talk about Hemingway writing about Notre Dame and USC, Red Grange, like all the way to Steve Spurrier, and all of that. What was the coolest story experience in this journey that you had of finding out about some things that maybe people don't know about college football?
Well, there was so much stuff. I went to so many games. I mean, really the best games, many of them that this sport has to offer. You mentioned one of them. I spent a morning with Steve Spurrier in Gainesville at his new restaurant, and it was just he and I, and we hung out. I shot some video, asked him a bunch of questions. We walked around his restaurant, which is full of memorabilia, and we just talked college football and sports. Another really cool stop was in Norman, Oklahoma. I hung out with Barry Switzer for a morning. And we got together outside Oklahoma's training complex, and the coach and I talked football and sort of just Americana for a while. And that was, so talking to Spurrier and Switzer in person was an incredible experience for me. But then just traveling around the country, I had some cool stuff. I took the train from Chicago to South Bend, Indiana for USC Notre Dame, which is how they used to go to that game for years. And for years, they played it in Chicago at Soldier Field because Notre Dame Stadium wasn't big enough on campus. So a bunch of stuff like that's going to show up in the book where people are going to, kind of see where we were and where we are.
We have discussed many things from over the weekend, but the thing that Saturday night in Austin, Georgia, Texas, so much came out of that game, and Georgia wins 30-15. What did you see when Georgia's defense obviously were let out of the pound like rabid dogs against UT's offensive line and Quinn Ewers?
Yeah, I saw Texas's offensive line get confused by Georgia's defense. Georgia's defense looked like it was playing on another level for quite a bit of that game. Some of the stems and stunts and switches and blitzes they brought and coverages they switched, I thought it really confused Quinn Ewers. And then on top of being confused, his offensive line missed some assignments and some blocks, and he got rocked pretty good a couple of times. So when you're looking at Quinn Ewers and the Heisman chatter and the best quarterback in college football chatter, that was clearly a humbling performance, even benched toward the end of the first half. So, meeting number one between Texas and Georgia, that was a decisive Georgia victory, and Texas is going to have to be sharper if they meet again.
Mark, though, with Texas and Oklahoma in the SEC this year, obviously Texas is much more ready to join than Oklahoma, but we have already seen stark realities of this is what you wanted when you jumped in.
Yeah, and they'll be fine. Jumping conferences like this, moving leagues, the first is almost always going to be tough. There are a few examples of teams moving over and just thriving early. Penn State came into the Big Ten and had a pretty good year one and then won the league year two, 93, 94. But, leaving the Big 12 for the SEC, the week-to-week schedule is going to be different. The bodies in that league are different. So, the history, the heritage of those programs, the support they get from their fans, from their boosters, and the way the university facilitates football, I mean, they'll be able to get the guys they want, get them into school and get the players. So it's just going to be a process of adjusting. And then with Oklahoma in particular, I'm not sure the coaching situation is what they want it to be long term. So that's the other key, of course, is you have to get the right chieftain in to lead your program or it's not going to work anywhere.
They have 4 more games, I guess, left in conference play, maybe 5, and every one of them, I think, is against a ranked team, including Ole Miss this week. They have Maine, which is that SEC stick some random game in the back of your schedule to give you a break. If they don't get another, what are they now, 3-4? If they don't get bowl eligible, you think Brent Venables, no matter the buyout, might be done there?
He could be. I never want to say no about that because a school that's as serious about football as Oklahoma is, they will make the moves they feel like they need to make. I think it's going to depend on how Oklahoma looks and how Oklahoma plays. They dumped the offensive coordinator. So clearly the moment they felt Seth Luttrell was not the long-term answer at that position, they let him go and they're going to try and work towards next season. So that could conceivably happen to Venables if they feel he's not the guy long term. But, we'll see this week, first week with the reconfigured offensive situation. And then, people are going to be looking hard at how hard Oklahoma's players play for this staff going forward. So that situation very much up in the air.
What were your thoughts on how tight the Big 12 is at the top with the 3 teams that they have, and then they've got others like Colorado right behind there knocking on the door?
Yeah, the Big 12 is a fascinating league to me. I put out a tweet not too long ago, and I said the correct quote about the Big 12 is it's not deep, but it's wide. And it's not necessarily, you wouldn't look at it and say there are 3 or 4 definite title contenders, but you would look across and say there are 8 or 9 teams that could all beat each other on any weekend. Look at Iowa State this weekend with Central Florida at home. I mean, escaped in the final moments. And Central Florida hasn't looked like a particularly good team this season. They're 3-4, 1-3 Big 12. So, some teams are coming on. Kansas State is starting to look better. BYU is another team that reminds me a little of TCU a few years ago. They keep winning. It's close. It's dangerous. They're playing with fire, but they keep winning. So the Big 12 to me, what was the other one I was going to bring up? Baylor at Texas Tech. Out of nowhere, Texas Tech looked like it was a bit of a rising team, had some momentum, had figured stuff out, and Baylor just blasts them 59-35. And, Baylor's 3-4, 1-3 overall. So to me, that's kind of what the Big 12 is this year. Is it's just wide. There are just a lot of teams that can win on any Saturday, and it's entertaining football for certain.
Let me ask you about Army-Navy. Army's off this week. Navy's playing Notre Dame at home, or actually at MetLife. But it's been a great story. First time since the late 20s that both of them are unbeaten this deep in the season. Vanderbilt 25. What are your thoughts about just the reminiscing about Army-Navy? And they each have had some nice runs of late, but rarely has it been together.
Yeah, it's incredible. It is fun. It's like we're flashing back to like the World War II era or the World War I era. It's all of a sudden Army and Navy are just hammering everyone they play. It's been incredible. I mean, so many of these games have been blowouts, and the kind of scores you just don't see the service academies put up because they're so methodical generally with their triple option offenses, and they don't go downfield all that often. And that's just not true this year for either program. I love it personally because I love service academy football. They both play in great stadiums. Their campuses are fantastic, and they're such unique pieces to this country, and the fact they play football at the highest level. So, it was funny when they moved to the American, and it was discovered that they could play in the conference championship game against each other and then would play the regular Army-Navy game the week after. Everyone kind of assumed, all right, well, that's neat, but that'll never happen. They'll never play back-to-back weeks like that. And all of a sudden, it looks like year one with both in the league, it very well could happen. So that would be a bizarre situation to have them play twice like that. But for me and for anybody who likes the academies, this year has been amazing.
Yes, like anytime something like that, well, that won't happen. It happens.
Yeah. Absolutely. Mark, one of the articles you wrote on your site was from September 27th, and it is about the history of amateurism and the NCAA and where it came from. And it is a fantastic read for anybody who's trying to cope with the idea of how we got here and the craziness that is college sports. And I'm not at all shocked to read that Walter Camp was the guy who really kind of created the fake amateurism that the NCAA was all the way back in the early days of this. And especially he was also the guy, and I'm sure you know this, that hated the forward pass. He did not want the forward pass. He thought it was not the game, and fought when Teddy Roosevelt made everybody get in a room and make rules against the forward pass. But tell us a little bit about Walter Camp and being the original bag man.
Yeah, well, Walter Camp, that's true about the forward pass. And the reason, he had multiple reasons he didn't like it, but one of the main ones was, and this was always, if you're wondering why Walter Camp thinks one way or the other, is it good for Yale? He really ran that program. He was only actually coach for a few years, but he was the CEO, architect, owner, operator, essentially, of Yale football for 30 years. And he recruited guys. He made sure guys got paid. He got them housed. He got them basically old-timey name, image, and likeness deals. I mean, he signed them to They'd get commissions on cigarette packs sold in New Haven. They could sell the scorecards at Yale baseball games, and they'd make a good living playing football for Yale, and Yale was dominant. So, yeah, the original idea of amateurism, it came over from England, actually, and it was the gentleman amateur ideal. And it was really, there was nothing else behind it other than kind of a class argument, which is upper class doesn't want to compete against lower class, which if you're thinking about the United States, that doesn't really make sense over here because we don't have the English class system. But it didn't stop our universities, and they essentially decided that to be an amateur and to be unpaid and to compete was what gentlemen do, and it was the high status thing to do. So they developed college football along those lines. And for no really better reason than that, it caught hold. And so anything that was ever paid to these athletes, any compensation, it was under the table. And that came forward to our day. So it's we're living through a radical departure. Once the schools decided that they were going to share media revenue directly with athletes, which is what's going to happen in the starting next season, I believe, that is as far a departure from where this game began with guys like Walter Camp back in the late 1800s as you could possibly get. So it's a bit complex, but that's kind of the basic gist of it.
I just wanted to highlight it because the more I read about things, throughout history, the more you find out the reason we do things now that don't make sense is because somebody 150 years ago did it this way and we didn't change. So if you're ever wondering why we did it this way in the first place, it's because Walter Camp thought that we should all be gentlemen. And then
the gentleman amateur.
Yeah. I wonder what, and again, this is not old man get off my lawn because that could even be me at times, but what Newt Rockne, Walter Camp, among some of those others, would think of where college football is today?
Well, I think they'd be bewildered by it, to be honest. It was so different. Newt Rockne died in 1930, so his heyday was in the late teens and the 1920s. And there wasn't even such thing as a grant and aid scholarship at that time. So rules were very loose, and what you could give to players and not give to players, to provide housing, to provide books and schooling. It was in a lot of ways very informal. So one of the advantages Newt Rockne did have at Notre Dame in those early days, Notre Dame was not the prestige university that it is today, is football ruled the campus. And Rockne was one of the most famous people, not, in his state, in the United States. He was famous in his home country of Norway. I mean, he became that big. You couldn't really overstate how famous Newt Rockne was in the 20s. He wouldn't understand what was going on today. He'd have to be brought up to speed. You'd have to explain to him what a athletic scholarship was. Start there and go forward.
One thing, Mark, and again, if you have not been on his Twitter feed, it's Fifth Down College Football CFB. Plus, he's also writing that book. Also heard on ESPN, Sirius XM, and major media outlets, including ours here on 365 Sports. Alabama has now had the huge win against Georgia, and now they've had losses, of course, a couple of them, including Vanderbilt and then Tennessee. They play, I think, is it Missouri next? I don't know what's going to happen there, but do you think that if they were to lose another game here in the next week or two, that there will be some voters in the AP poll that will shake, their hands would start shaking about dropping them out of the top 25?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, how strange would that be after all these years of dominance? This already, I don't remember the exact number on this, but this is the first time Alabama has lost 2 games before mid-November since 2007. So that's how good this program has been for this long. But, it can be hard for people to separate past from present. It's Alabama. How could we possibly do that to them? But it's important to watch what's happening now and look at what condition they're in this season. And they're transitioning to a completely new program, totally new staff. It's a bit of a different style of play in a lot of ways, particularly on the defensive side. And it's clear it's going to take a year to set in. And then next year, we'll probably have a better idea of how Kalen DeBoer is really doing there and if his style of coaching and running the program is catching on. yeah, if they lose coming up to Missouri, they got LSU after that. They could absolutely fall out of the top 25.
Yeah, you wonder about. There's even some like, well, wait a minute. They've lost twice. They're still in the college football playoff mix. But if anyone else, if you took the name away, would probably, even though those were good, teams. Vanderbilt now in the top 25. There's nothing wrong. College football can survive without Alabama being in the playoff or inside the top 25. Thanks for your time, Mark. Great stuff. Good luck with the book. When did you say it was going to be sometime this spring?
Yeah, it'll be this. I want to get the first 12-team playoff is going to be the coda to the book, the final chapter, bowl season, postseason, and we'll get the first 12 teams. So, yeah, shortly after that this spring, it'll be out.
We'll look forward to it, and when it comes out, we'll get you back on. Hopefully before then, but get you back on again to promote it. Thanks for your time. Good luck with it.
All right, guys. Appreciate you. Had a good time.
You too. Mark Schipper with us. Again, it's a heck of a book he's writing, and all the history that, Paul, you brought up a lot of that too, with Fifth Down College Football on his Twitter feed and a newsletter that comes with it too.
Our audience and what this site is, what his Twitter feed is, what the book will be, overlaps immensely.
No,
right?
yeah,
I think there are people who will love some of this stuff that is on there. Especially, again, you start to – you wonder why we do things, and I never knew that until I read this about, why from the beginning didn't they do this or when it was, and it's, because in the early part of this century we got kind of obsessed with Victorian England and or the last century, being gentlemen, and we spread that out through everything.
Yeah.
We let the Ivy League kind of tell everybody what to do, and that's why we're in the mess we're in.
Yeah, and the note about Walter Camp, Newt Rockne, as he said, 1930 he passed away, but even guys like Bo Schembechler and others, Bob Devaney, Bud Wilkinson, Darrell Royal, some of them even that have been more recent, although it's been a while for a lot of them, it's just like, what's going on? And yet, you know what they would do if they had these same, they probably would figure it out and find a way to continue to win. The good ones do that. And then some might, like Tony Bennett or Nick Saban or among others, walk away because they don't want really anything else to do with it, and they've had their success. When we come back, John Curts from the Kansas City Sports Network, he's going to be with us. Also today, J.J. Joe, Baylor radio color analyst. He was there in Lubbock during that game. Phil Bennett at 5, and then we'll look at the Big 12 North and a few other college football nuggets. All of that, Paul's Top 5. This is 365 Sports.
Yes, I'm Samantha Duval with Texas Beef House, and welcome out to our ranch. We're a family-owned and operated ranch here in White House, Texas, and we sell all of our beef exclusively on bidonbeef.com. We offer Wagyu and Angus steaks and hamburger assortments. And the best thing is, the next couple auctions, you are guaranteed to get 100% graded prime beef. Free shipping in the state of Texas or on orders of $300 or more. And don't forget to use code 365sports to get a discount. So check us out, bidonbeef.com. We have sales every 10 to 14 days.
Announcing Genco's Car Hugger Special. Right now, refinance your auto loan at Genco and get 3 months of no car payments. Plus, your loan will be automatically entered for a chance to win your next 3 car payments on us. Enjoy 5.19% for 48 months and then skip your payments until 2025. Subject to credit approval and membership eligibility. For more information, go to GencoFCU.org. Member NCUA.
Baylor Scott & White Southwest Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, the team physicians for Baylor Athletics, diagnosing and treating all sports-related injuries, including concussions. These specialists also provide orthopedic services for athletes and non-athletes alike, whether it's knee or shoulder pain, a wrist injury, orthopedic spine care, and even an arthritis and total joint clinic. Trust the doctors Baylor Athletics trust. Baylor Scott & White Southwest Sports Medicine and Orthopedics wants to get you back in the game.
Ready to take your business to the next level? Carrion Solutions has got you covered. We deliver world-class IT consulting, including Quest On Demand and Migration Manager, M365 and Exchange migrations, Active Directory assessments, security hardening, and Windows Server upgrades. Our experts specialize in consulting, monitoring, support, and managed IT services. We promise vision, professionalism, and unbeatable value. Satisfaction guaranteed. If you're not happy, we make it right. Remember the name Carrion Solutions. For more info, email sales@carrionsolutions.com or visit carrionsolutions.com. That's CARRION solutions.com. Carrion Solutions IT success guaranteed.
Developed by Startup Waco, a nonprofit organization, GXG is a program designed to support the entrepreneurial development of Baylor University student athletes through NIL activations. The program helps student athletes maximize their platforms and offers a comprehensive support system for them to create and grow new businesses that not only benefit themselves, but also uplift the local economy. Fans who wish to support student athletes can donate to GXG via the GXG NIL Fund, BaylorBears.com/GXG. Contributions to support NIL activations through GXG can be made at BaylorBears.com/GXG. For more information, follow @GXG_GreenXGold on social media and visit the official website www.gxg.startupwaco.com. GXG, empowering student athlete entrepreneurship and uplifting the local economy through NIL activations.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
The 4 o'clock hour is sponsored by Boozer's Jewelers, the wedding ring store, specializing in custom jewelry and repair, all in-house.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
Here we go, 365 Sports. John Curts, Kansas City Sports Network, with us on the show today, and of course does a lot of work and has a newsletter as well when it comes to the Big 12. John, thanks for your time. So the teams at the top all found a way to win. BYU late Friday, obviously BYU late Friday, and then what we saw with Kansas State taking care of their business and looking very impressive doing it. Iowa State found a way against UCF. Are they not quite, but do you see those three in a way separating from everybody else?
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on. I would say those three plus maybe Colorado. I'm tempted to float Colorado into kind of that top group as well. I know that Arizona's really struggling right now, but I think what Colorado's done a couple of times on the road now, each of the last 2 times they've been on the road, and really just squashing a so-so team is leading me to believe, especially with the way that their defense is playing, that they may belong in that conversation as well. But absolutely, I think K-State has about as much upside as anybody in that group, but certainly you have to respect what Iowa State and BYU have done, even if, I mean, look, you say what you will about the opponents that they were playing and a combined record of 1-5 and Big 12 play, but finding a way to win, man, there's something to that. And I'm just start to get like 2022 TCU vibes out of both BYU and Iowa State, I think, frankly. But, you know, honestly, as I was watching particularly the play from Retzloff to Lassiter at the end of the BYU game, it was giving me flashbacks to like Hypnotoad in a hurry for TCU in 2022 and what happened there. It felt like one of those types of moments. So really start to wonder if it's going to turn into one of those types of seasons for BYU and or Iowa State.
For K-State, didn't run the ball great this week against West Virginia and dared Avery Johnson to beat him throwing the ball, and eventually that happened. How have you seen him progress, especially the last couple of weeks, Colorado, and now against West Virginia as a passer?
He's getting a lot better, just much more consistent. You know, I mean, the deep ball has gotten a ton better. He had one, I mean, he should have been over 300 yards, probably more like 350. Jace Brown dropped a great deep ball. There were a couple of other drops, and then he did flat out have one miss in the end zone that would have given him a career high 4th touchdown too late in the game. And I know he was really lamenting that afterwards, but you talk about short, intermediate, and long, like everything seems to have just come a long, long ways from the UT Martin game back at the beginning of the year, or even like BYU, where he was letting one mistake compound into another. And I think it was after BYU where we really saw this take off. He was great against Oklahoma State throwing the football. He was pretty good against Colorado and great when it mattered down the stretch. Obviously, hitting a deep ball to Jace Brown on that last drive to take them right down the field in 3 plays to go ahead and eventually win the game. And then he had definitely his best day as a passer against West Virginia. So I know, I saw some pushback from West Virginia fans saying like, well, look, our secondary is terrible. If you go look at their PFF grades, they're all brutal. And I get that. West Virginia is certainly not a secondary that anybody's going to write home about. But the accuracy on the throws still counts for something, whether he's throwing against air or whoever's back there defending. You can just tell his general touch and feel with the ball has come a long, long ways. And they've needed it because they have not been able to run the ball with him. There was not a single carry for Avery Johnson on Saturday in Morgantown. And I think I know what Chris Kleiman's saying in his press conference. They're kind of downplaying this. I think you can look at it logically and say, well, he had an injury against Colorado. They didn't run him after that. They didn't run him at all in Morgantown, not a single carry. When you think about, all the jokes about him being a glorified running back and all this stuff, they didn't utilize his best weapon at all. I think you'd have to likely surmise that there's something going on there. And he's having to throw the ball, and he's doing it incredibly effectively. And so then it doesn't matter as much that you're not running him. The other thing is West Virginia completely locked down DJ Giddens. I mean, totally locked him down. You go look at the final box score, it's even a little bit deceiving because he broke off a long run toward the end of the game in garbage time. Man, he was under 30 yards rushing when the outcome was still in doubt. So Avery didn't have his legs. He didn't have DJ Giddens' legs. It was literally all on his arm. And that's really all K-State needed to win a road game in a pretty hostile environment. So that is incredibly encouraging about where this team is going because now they have another dimension. They have a different way that they can beat you. I think beforehand you felt like K-State could kind of get game scripted out of it if you fall behind, like what happened in Provo. Now you look at it and say, all right, if they fall behind by a couple of scores, Avery Johnson might be able to throw them back into a game. That's become now a legitimate discussion.
John, they are wildly favored for this chapter of the Sunflower Showdown. Can you just kind of give a primer to folks who aren't a part of either fan base on, what this game means to both sides? And also, I'd imagine you're feeling pretty good going into this one, given what we've seen from the Jayhawks. But what are you also expecting in terms of this annual rivalry?
Yeah, I am feeling, obviously relatively confident, but I'll give the caveat that, I think Kansas is still dangerous here. For one, this will be the way that they could salvage somewhat of their season. Nothing's going to bring back college football playoff hopes and Big 12 championship hopes, which were legitimately there. But if they were to go snap a 15-game losing streak in Manhattan to potentially keep K-State out of a Big 12 championship game and away from the college football playoff, those are your stakes. That's what's on the line. This could make a world of difference in how Kansas fans and just the program in general feels about its season when they've struggled the way that they have so far. So I think when you talk about the stakes of the game, that's really about where it lies. And so that's some of the danger. I think you're going to get a kitchen sink sort of effort from Kansas with that, where they're really going to throw everything out there at K-State. And, I saw Lance Leipold said at his press conference today that Jalen Daniels starting to shake the rust off and that maybe it's just taken longer for him to shake some of the rust off after not playing for so long. I could understand that being something that's legitimately happening here, and he's looked a lot better. Even in the Arizona State game that they lost, it was really much more on the defense. He scored 31 points, I believe, there. It was the defense that gave it up at the end. So I would subscribe to the theory that it seems like Jalen Daniels is playing better football. They got some confidence back, which was much needed against Houston, and they're going to go throw absolutely everything they have at K-State on Saturday. So K-State better come to play. I think they will. I think it helps that K-State's always had way more Kansas kids on the roster. And, you look at the star players, Avery Johnson from Kansas, DJ Giddens from Kansas. The leaders of this team are from in-state too, Austin Moore on the defensive side of the ball. So, I think K-State will be up and ready to play. But I would expect a fight. I would expect a fight out of Kansas that maybe looks a little bit like it did 2 years ago in 2022 when K-State was on its way to winning a Big 12 championship and Kansas was about a 500 team. And they played a pretty competitive game in Manhattan that K-State still won by double digits.
Spencer Goff brought this up in the chat room. You had mentioned something about you were talking K-State, BYU, Iowa State. I asked you about those three, if they had separated. You also mentioned the possibility of including Colorado. And you made a comment that when you were looking at BYU, some look at their schedule. Is that you referring to people nationally that might look at BYU's schedule? Because they do have the dominant win against K-State.
Well, I meant in terms of Saturday. If you look at the games that Iowa State and BYU played on Saturday, they were not against, great opponent. The combined record, I think, was 1-5 of Oklahoma State and UCF in the conference. So, yeah, I mean, as a whole, yeah. But look, BYU, because I think if you were arguing resume right now, who do you power rank number one, for instance, in the Big 12? If you're looking at Iowa State and BYU, I think you could say that BYU has the better resume. But I think what a lot of people look at it and say, and I tend to be one of these, is I feel like Iowa State has a higher ceiling. And I feel like Iowa State has more ways to beat you, mainly just because I think their passing game is a little bit more dynamic. And that's why, even if you look at the last two drives of those games, it was a bit of a struggle for BYU. I mean, they got there, and Darius Laster made an incredible play. Jake Retzloff made some incredible plays. But it was a little more sluggish down the field. Man, Iowa State got the ball at the 20-yard line and just went right through the UCF defense like hot butter, like a knife in hot butter, like just straight to the end zone. It was so predictable, very, very easy. Maybe helped out by a bit of a controversial pass interference call, but I'm not sure that mattered. I think Iowa State was going to punch that in anyway. So, yeah, I mean, kind of a tangent there based on your discussion, but I would not knock the BYU schedule at all. And I think it's a great thing for the league if these teams keep winning. If those three that you mentioned and Colorado, all those teams keep winning, it's going to be harder and harder to keep multiple teams out of the playoff from the Big 12. So I'm certainly not going to be the one that's going to schedule watch or knock anyone from the Big 12 there.
Well, John, you laid out how they can make things interesting, and the most obvious way is obviously for BYU and Iowa State to win out. But how much do you feel like the Big 12's battling a perception problem currently? Because there are arguments to be made about the top 25 and sort of where they're being positioned of right there at the back end of the top 10 and getting leaped over by, a team here and there. How much do you have some concern for the narrative already kind of being put in place nationally about the Big 12 and how deserving they are to have more than one team?
Yeah, I'm going to preface what I'm about to say by saying that I am somebody who's very much, I wouldn't say like bought into. I am just very skeptical in general about the treatment that the Big 12 will receive because, I mean, you guys know we've been through years and years of this and treated unfairly a lot of times. You guys lived through the 2014 college football playoff and everything that happened there with Baylor and TCU. There's a lot of trauma there. And also, we all follow on a daily basis how the sport is evolving and how much power is just tilted. The axis of power is just completely tilted toward the SEC and the Big Ten. But with all that being said, I actually got some pretty good pushback from a listener and reader this weekend when I was kind of making the same point. I was shout out to my guy Cole Manbeck, who hosts the 3 Mile podcast with me. I was sort of talking him down, like he was laying out: is there a scenario where K-State wins out but doesn't get to the Big 12 championship game, and then would they get in as an at-large? And I just said, dude, I am not trusting a Big 12 at-large getting in at all under any circumstance. And I got a little pushback, and they were like, look, if you go back and look, I'm trying to remember the specific stat, but it was like, I believe the stat was that in the playoff era, no Power 5 team that's finished with just one loss has been ranked lower than 7th. And both times the team was ranked number 7, it was actually Ohio State. And then I was like, 2 years ago, K-State was 9-3 at the end of the regular season, and they were still ranked in the top 10 of the college football playoff rankings. So we do actually have some evidence that would suggest that the committee will be a little bit more objective and perhaps a little kinder to the Big 12 than like an AP poll voter would be, or certainly just a national talking head or a pundit that covers college football. So I'm slightly more optimistic because of that. And I think what I had to remind myself is, look, as much as Sankey and Petiti have all the power right now, there's a reason that they're sitting around talking about, hey, do we need to get rid of a college football playoff selection committee? I mean, that's a part of what they're discussing is like, we may need to just do away with this committee because they don't want to have to worry about any of that. So as ridiculous as it sounds, they may be a little bit worried about what the treatment is going to be there for this playoff. And so we may get changes because of it. We may see the 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever they want to do, auto bids to the college football playoff happen in response to the Big 12 perhaps getting multiple teams in this year. But the playoff committee actually may be more open to it than what we all think right now. So I'm going to be cautiously optimistic on that front.
Well, I know this is that everybody needs to run the table until they play each other, right? Iowa State, K-State, BYU, and a couple of them don't. So they can't afford that. If you know going in that your resume is going to be looked at a little bit differently than others, then you can't lose. You just whether that's right, fair, or wrong, and it just kind of seems to be the case. And I know that's hard to do because that conference that we just had a guest on with Mark Schipper. He said he doesn't. What did he say? That he doesn't know if the Big 12 is deep, but it's wide.
Yeah.
Like there's just so many teams that can beat each other, even if there's a couple of 3 or 4 that seem like they're near the top. Just you can't lose. And whether that's fair or not, you can't lose because we know, John, in the NCAA men's basketball tournament, the Big 12 has been given favoritism, right? And then we've seen some teams get in the tournament and they've blown a tire pretty early.
Yeah, and you're right. It's not always going to be fair, but I think a good case study in this, I keep bringing them up, but TCU from 2 years ago.
Yep.
People talked about them the whole way through. Like, okay, you're kicking a last-minute field goal to beat Baylor there. I think they had 5 one-score wins. There were a lot of close games. They were also getting the luck of like a starting quarterback seemed to be out every single week that they were playing a team that year, and everybody talked about it. But then at the end of the season, they were 12-0. And what are you going to do with them at that point? I mean, they did lose a tight Big 12 championship game, but they basically forced the hand of the committee and everybody. And then what did they do? They went and beat Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
They were the only team to beat Michigan at the start of this season. They were the last team to beat Michigan when they were the defending national champs. So you can do it. I mean, you can make some noise and do it, but you have to take the choice really out of their hands. And I think back to your point, yeah, that's it. BYU, whether it's by hook or by crook, I mean, however you're doing it, just continue to win games. And yeah, Farmageddon needs to be a massive, massive game for the league. That one could really, really help if both K-State and Iowa State win out until that point.
John, just a brief basketball question. Media days are this week. Kansas State has done some work, as everybody has, but Jerome Tang's portal haul, impressive this year. How quickly do you think he can get all these guys to play together?
Well, that's really the question. I don't doubt any of the talent there at all. I think this year, even before the Naquan Tomlin situation and Quez Glover and everything that happened to really hurt K-State's roster, kind of bottom it out, I still think on paper this roster looks much more talented than what they had last year. And look, NIL has helped a lot with that. Jerome Tang has been incredibly aggressive, doing all sorts of NIL fundraising events to make sure that they had what they needed to go out and put that roster together. It's not the most, if you were designing it from scratch and just picking whatever players you wanted, they just have so many like big guys and lots of length, maybe a little thinner in the backcourt. It's not exactly the way you'd probably configure a roster, but there's a ton of talent and different creative ways you can use all of it. And that will be the question. How does it all come together? Coleman Hawkins is not only one of the most expensive players in the country, but one of the most versatile and talented. He also is somebody that I think because of injury and other things he had going on, didn't spend as much time around the team in the offseason as some of the others. So I know that's been a part of things once they got to campus, like, all right, we got to get Coleman now integrated into all of this. Doug McDaniel, I think, is about as talented as they come as a point guard. What's he going to be as a leader and a distributor and getting everybody involved? And these are the questions that they are going to have to answer. But I will just say this, if you give Jerome Tang that kind of talent, it's not like the team a couple of years ago that went to the Elite Eight was some sort of perfect, Picasso in the off season about this time 2 years ago. And we were talking about it. Nobody had high expectations for that. And they basically had just 2 great players and a bunch of Jags, and they had to figure it out, and they did, and got to the Elite Eight. So I'm pretty confident as long as nothing crazy happens, they're not dealing with meetings with the university president the entire season. I'm pretty confident that they can put together a really good team, which may still make you 6th or 7th in the Big 12, but you could be a 4 or 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. So I'm very excited. I think there's a lot of optimism. The vibes are very high with that group just because they know the caliber of players that they actually have.
Hey, man, appreciate it, John. Appreciate your time. You, of course, have Open for Business, which is a newsletter that comes out that you write, and what you do with the Kansas City, of course, with the Sports Network there as well. Thanks for your time. Have a great week.
Hey, anytime, guys. Great to talk.
John Curts with us on 365 Sports, and J.J. Joe around the corner. Phil Bennett after that. A lot to get to. Still more college football news, including Oklahoma changing their offensive coordinator, Utah changing their offensive coordinator. If you look at those two teams offensively, they're a mess. And in other ways, maybe too. This is 365 Sports. Alan Samuels, Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram Fiat, Loop 340, and east of 84 in Waco, and a lot of great October specials that continue. Ted Teague, of course, is the general manager. David Gray, head of what they do when it comes to those who sell you cars, and he's been doing that with Alan Samuels for quite some time. Buy any new Jeep and get a Jeep Wave program, which includes 2 oil changes and 2 tire rotations for 2 years from the date of purchase. Ram Power Days continues. Alan Samuels in Waco, scary deals, including, of course, some Halloween specials. Over 300 new cars, trucks, and SUVs available. Get a demo 2025 Ram 1500 Laramie Crew Cab 4x4 for $16,000 off MSRP. Also, 0.9% financing for 72 months on an in-stock 2024 Ram 1500 Crew Cab or Quad Cab. Ted Teague, Alan Samuels, 300-plus cars, trucks, and SUVs on the lot, ready for you. Loop 340 east of 84 in Waco.
Get ready, Baylor fans. The ultimate game weekend experience awaits you at the Baylor Club. Kick off your weekend with our Friday Night Live pep rally. With live entertainment and special appearances from the Baylor Spirit Squad, it's the perfect way to start your game weekend with a roar. On Saturdays, don't miss our Knox Hall tailgate. Enjoy delicious food, ice-cold drinks, and great company as you gear up for the big game. And after the weekend's excitement, wrap it all up with our famous Bear brunches on Sundays. Don't wait. Make your game weekends legendary with the Baylor Club membership today.
There are 26 letters in the alphabet, over 600,000 words in the dictionary, and just 3 of them said together can change everything. Let's order pizza. Those 3 words lead to dough made from scratch and 3 fresh signature cheeses that blanket golden crust in a heavenly melt on Marco's Pizza that'll blow your mind. So visit Marcos.com to order and stop by Marco's Pizza in Belmead, China Spring, Woodway, and in Robinson. Marco's. Pizza lovers get it.
With so many companies and policies out there, it gets so confusing shopping for insurance, and I never know if I'm getting the policy that's right for me. Luckily, I met the team at the Niche Group Insurance Agency. With the Niche Group, you can go to one company and get access to coverage options from many insurance carriers, and you get to speak to a real person about your specific coverage needs. With the Niche Group, I know I'm getting the right coverage at the right price. If you need insurance, talk to the experts at the Niche Group at 1-800-258-8302.
TFNB Your Bank for Life is the official local bank of Baylor Athletics. Find out why more Central Texas are making TFNB their bank for life. Sign up for our Edge checking and savings accounts to earn interest or cash back. With 5 convenient locations and an award-winning mobile app, banking has never been easier. TFNB Your Bank for Life. Member FDIC.
This is 365 Sports.
The Sikkim 365 app is brought to you by Alan Samuels Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram Fiat. Come by, let's be friends.
Here we go, 365 Sports, this 4 o'clock hour on a Monday after yet another chaotic weekend in many ways in college football. J.J. Joe, Baylor Radio, color analyst, former Baylor quarterback, joins us, who was in Lubbock as Sawyer Robertson went off. But every phase of the game did for Baylor. 5 touchdowns. He has been named the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Week. Bryson Washington, the newcomer, had a big game. JJ, you've seen glimpses, but that seemed like it was all at one time. It finally came together. Was it Tech's defense is that bad, or was everything just kind of finally meshed together for Baylor?
Smoak, thanks for having me on. I think everything fell together. It felt like a combination of things, but, you know, we've seen glimpses of this team playing well. Iowa State early. Remember, they played well early. had the bad thing happen with the block punt, and then things seemed to turn for the worse. Then Iowa State figured us out in the second half. But the other day, I just thought that we felt, and rightfully so, that we could block them up front. I think I saw it early in our offensive linemen. They felt like they could block them. We had success running the ball early. Coach Spavital was very committed to it. And once you can run the ball and impose your will, Smoak, is hard to explain to people that, like, when you know they can't stop you in one phase, especially the run game, everything else grows off of that. So it came together, man. It was great to see.
Defensively, they made the plays when they had to. Obviously, giving up 35 is not a banner day, but they were able to not have that moment, though, JJ, that you talked about, the block punt or something where the momentum got sucked out of them. Do you think that maybe now they can see that, like, oh, we don't have to put all our eggs in one basket of every moment of this game could break us?
Yeah, I thought, the defense has shown in spurts that they could play at a certain level, and it's really offensively where we were a little inconsistent. But I'll say this: I mean, I was very apprehensive going to the game. I was asked before the game, "How do you feel?" And whenever I'm in Lubbock, anyway, I say this, but I said I don't feel good about this one, just because they showed that they could run the ball with their runner, and we hadn't shown that. And then I thought both teams in the passing game were about the same. So I'll tell you, I was really impressed, and really defensively, I thought we really kind of held what's their tailback's name again?
Taj Brooks.
Yeah, Brooks, and really in check. He had 60 yards at halftime, ended up with 125, but he had really the one big one. And then I felt like, they scored 2 touchdowns in the last 10 minutes of the game when really we kind of had a nice little gap on them. So I'm not saying that's acceptable, as Coach Aranda, I think, was a little upset that they scored anything, but I thought defensively we showed ourselves well on Saturday.
How much did it help having healthy Caden Jenkins, who just seems to grab an interception, every, couple of games or so, and a healthy Carl Williams the fourth? And, I mean, that's something that, the losing stacks up and you just don't want to hear excuses, JJ, but there have been things that have occurred where you're like, all right, like they don't have this, they don't have that, and they finally had a lot of that on Saturday.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Craig, I mean, I think it was a good thing that what happened to Caden Jenkins, and I don't mean having to miss games with whatever the injury was. I think in the Colorado game, he had a couple errors. He kind of lost balance, was a little bit overly physical, maybe didn't play those plays the right way in the Colorado game. And sometimes you find out what the measure of a young man is when you kind of go through something for the first time in his career where probably he was looked at as, hey, man, can you really play or not? Which we know he can. But I like to see that, okay, after he came back from whatever the injury was, he played good football on Saturday, and then he made, the kind of play we've used to seeing Caden Jenkins make. So I'm going to tell you, man, to have a guy who ultimately, I do agree with Coach Aranda, has NFL caliber talent, you need those guys to play at a high level. And I think I said that a few weeks ago that, the Matt Joneses, the Caden Jenkins, the Garmin Randolphs, all those guys have to play at a high level for this team to at least perform to the point that we expect it to.
JJ, like you said, there's been glimpses, but there were 2 times in that game, and it was early enough to where I said, oh, maybe this is different. And Tech cut the lead, 17-14 near the end of the half, and Baylor went right back down the field and scored. And then when they cut it 24-21, early third quarter, Brooks got loose for the first time. I'm like, oh, here comes that tidal wave.
Right.
And Baylor then went on a absolute just landslide, got a break in the special teams with the muff kick return. What was that like? Maybe past experiences, they didn't panic and just kept doing what they do?
I think so. But if you remember, Dave, against Iowa State, I mean, remember, Baylor jumped on Iowa State.
Yep, 14-3.
Had the block. They came back. I think we went into the half, up 3 or down 3 in the Iowa State game. I think we were up 3 maybe. Played a really good half where we should have been up a couple touchdowns. And when they closed the gap at the end of the half, at least I think we thwarted actually them having scored. We came out after half in the Iowa State game and scored. If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong. And I was like, okay, well, hey, man, we're going to be okay. But then we couldn't sustain it after that. So I think we've seen glimpses of this team having resiliency. It's just the execution was lacking at key times. So it was good to see him fight back. But I'll tell you, I said this before the game that I thought the talent between Tech and Baylor wasn't a big difference. The difference was those guys they had confidence they could win close games, and we didn't. We just never let it get close beyond that point that you mentioned, Smoak, and it was good to see.
Yep, I thought they responded, and that could have been a moment, especially the Taj Brooks run, because 4th and 1, it kind of got everybody juiced up. What was it like inside that stadium? Because we know it can be a very interesting atmosphere. Did they lose interest and kind of were they sitting on their hands?
It was quiet, man. I'm telling you, it's the quietest I've ever heard. Jones Stadium, and I've been there a lot of times. I know we had that break for about 10 years, but played there. I always thought people used to ask me what was one of the loudest stadiums you've been in, and I'm not sure if it's the way it's built because it's down a little bit. I felt like Jones Stadium was one of the loudest I'd ever been in, even louder than Tech, equivalent to A&M, but it was the quietest I've heard a stadium. But really, their team gave them very little to cheer about, and every time they did get something, as you mentioned, Baylor answered, and that's what you do, man. And this team has played pretty decent on the road, if we recall it, and yesterday on Saturday they put it all together.
Did Josh Cameron have the best game ever for a former walk-on?
Hey, he's had some pretty good ones.
Yeah,
that punt return was sweet. Those touches. Mm-hmm. I mean, Josh, man, has impressed me. I mean, in the last 3 years or whatever it's been, I mean, he's just kind of really just continually got better. And he's their lead dog now. I mean, he's the lead dog. You just expect the guy to make a play. And I thought, like, at one point in that game, they had Josh over to the right, press box side, where we were going. I'm thinking that was south. I'm not sure 100%. But I was upset that we didn't take a shot. He had a corners like 5'11" on him, and we didn't take a shot at him. I forgot what we did. I was kind of upset, like, dude, this dude's kind of got it going. He had the punt return. He had some other stuff. I'm going to give him out 10 targets. But we eventually got it to him, and he's a man amongst boys.
JJ, obviously the offensive line had a lot to do with helping out Sawyer Robertson, giving him plenty of time, and then also giving him a running game to take some of the heat off of him. But what's impressed you most about him, and how cool is that to also see DeQuan Finn get a little bit of shine there late in that game and really put that thing away when Tech had, kind of changed the ending there a little bit with a couple of scores?
Yeah, I was glad to see DeQuan get some action. He expected things to work out a certain way, and they didn't. I think I talked about this last time I was with you guys a few weeks ago. And it's good to see him get some action because, you never know in this game, man. We have 5 to play, and you just got to have another guy back there you feel comfortable that can, he's not playing at the level that Sawyer was in the throw game, but he's a veteran quarterback with talent. So it's good to see him get action, get a little run in there, get a score. And that was sweet to see. And then, of course, Sawyer has continued to grow. I said at the beginning, I wanted to see him early in the season because when the first game when we saw him and he got a little time, I felt like, I think this guy's light is on. I just think it came on. And this is just a continuation. I just think Sawyer now is at that point where he's got enough action. Not that he knows everything, but he's seen for the majority most of what people are going to do to him. And he's performing well. And if the guys come with him, if you give him a run game, like finally he's got a run game where he's not the run game, I tell you, man, it's a sight to behold.
All right, so the run game, speaking of which, Bryson Washington's different.
Yes.
I remember Keenan Hall even saying that to me, that with all due respect, he wasn't saying it wasn't Reese or Dominic Richardson or even Dawson Pendergrass, but he's different. As a guy that played the game, he doesn't get enough touches, and he finally did. He needs to be more consistent. He's been banged up, but why is he different, JJ?
And he's learning. I think with Bryson, if you think about it, you have the size, you have the speed, but you also got to think what he does to defense when you see that guy coming. He has the ability. Pendergrass has the size, but Pendergrass doesn't have the suddenness. Mm-hmm. I still like Dawson in the short yardage game, especially at goal line. I like him. He's kind of suffered because Bryson's come on, so his carries have suffered. But nevertheless, he's different. He has the size, he has speed. He hadn't really shown me as much of the elusiveness, but he has just enough to where I think of the other traits where it makes him highly effective in this offense. So if you think about it, man, I think he had 7 carries at half. He only ended with 10 carries, guys.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because I know he went out for a while. And I think he was dealing with some stuff. So in 10 carries, he had over 100 yards because he broke a few of them, and that line played well. I don't want to go without saying, I remember seeing Lingale on that first run he had. Lingale had a fantastic block to seal that thing. And those guys up front, as much as we bash them, against the Tech defensive line that I thought we should control, they did it.
Last thing, Oklahoma State. Man, they were close to getting one of those wins, but they've been kind of in a free fall, been a very disappointing year. Their quarterback play is kind of a mess, and now Rangel's hurt. Games at home, Baylor gets back home. The win might help people get back. It's homecoming.
Yeah.
How, but sometimes when it's in this moment, not back in the early part of the 2010s, but in a moment like this, you get maybe a chance to bring some people back. How big would it be with TCU the following week to put up a W other than just a win-loss column?
I think it'll be huge. This team needs to get on a run. Smoak. I mean, it's we've had so many close wins, or you want to call them losses, and we just didn't come through. Now I think this team saw, hey, if we perform at a high level, this is what it can look like. We can take a team out. Oklahoma State will be well. I know that Ollie Gordon left the game early, I think, last week, so I'm not sure what his health is. But Oklahoma State played well against BYU in the hostile environment. They're going to be a hard out. But this team needs this W. We need it. So then if you stack a couple, I think if this team can stack a couple and just taste it a little bit, taste it again, I think the rest of them, they'll figure it out. And I'm saying that right now. I think if they can get this one and taste it and stay healthy as much as we can, I think this team can finish this thing out. And I'm interested to see it. I don't want to get ahead of myself. That's why I'm saying this week is huge, because Oklahoma State is the kind of team that they've lost a few close ones, and they can beat you.
Yep, no question. Thank you for the time, young man. Appreciate it. JJ, Baylor radio color analyst and also former Baylor quarterback, with us on Mondays every other week. Ricky Thompson on Tuesdays every other week on what they saw after a couple of weeks off after the off week last week. There was that speech from a walk-on player prior to the game. I guess it was either before the game or the night before, where he basically just, and Dave Aranda said this, he basically just put everything on the table and said, we don't have any mulligans after if we lose this one. They're 2-4, 2-5 doesn't mean you're done. But he basically apparently just like eye-opening truth serum about what the game meant. Not sure that's why they played the way they did, but it perhaps caught the attention of a few others. And then Aranda today during his regular Monday media session making the comment that I think he meant Josh Cameron, that just got furious during the practice and lit everybody up. He said, just basically lit everybody up in the offense from that point forward, had a pretty focused, locked-in week the rest of the week that led maybe to Saturday's performance. When we come back, Phil Bennett, Seth Luttrell, relieved of his duties at Oklahoma. He knows Seth well. He coached at Oklahoma at one point. What are some of the things that Phil saw in that Georgia-Texas game? His thoughts about Baylor's win against Tech and more. And this is 365 Sports. IdealMRI.com, state-of-the-art imaging machine, and $497 is all it will cost you, and maybe less. The average MRI is now around $1,100, $1,300. It all depends. I've paid more than that before I learned about Ideal MRI. Ideal MRI is in the Central Texas marketplace off I-35 in the southern part of Waco. And yes, $497 or less for an MRI. And their state-of-the-art imaging machine is as good as it gets. I have been in it. I've told you those stories before. Their Texan specialists are great when they call you to set up the appointment. Once your doctor refers your name to them, it's simple. It's really, really simple. They always make me feel comfortable, and there have been a couple of MRIs prior to getting to know them where I got spooked a little bit because I can be claustrophobic. If that's something that concerns you, I've told you, don't worry about it. They'll do a great job with that. It's IdealMRI.com, Dr. Rob Maxey and Company in the Central Texas marketplace off I-35 in Waco.
Baylor alumni are more than 160,000 strong. When we all join hands to support our university, we don't just move the needle, we move mountains. Working together, we create life-changing opportunities for students on the field, in the classroom, in the laboratory, and in life for generations to come. So get connected. Get involved. Learn how at baylor.edu/alumni.
Midway Athletics and UBO Business Services are two names that exude winning. From Midway's top Central Texas Star test scores to college-like extracurricular facilities and UBO Business Services' industry-leading customer service scores, you can trust in these two winning programs. Best of luck to Coach Joe Gillespie and the Midway Panthers. And look at your sticker on your office equipment. If it does not say UBO, call Midway Class of 2020, Duff, Daxon, Dane, or Sean Hunt at 254-709-2101 or ubeo.com.
Our good friend Brad Boozer, Boozer's Jewelers here at 365 Sports. Now, Brad, people who watch and listen to our show know I'm a double-time customer for you, engagement ring and wedding band, and you guys do that great, but that's not all you do at Boozer's Jewelers.
Absolutely. And I always like to say, it's a new year. It's a great way to start the year out. Go through your old jewelry. Go through your wife's jewelry box. Go through anything you're maybe not wearing, something that's broken, something that you're not using. We do a massive amount of custom work. We can take your old jewelry, old diamonds, old watches, and we can convert it into something special for you and make a one-of-a-kind piece of jewelry. And if that's not something you're interested in, a great thing is we can turn that into cash. So we buy gold, we buy diamonds, we'll buy Rolex watches, any kind of heirloom jewelry, anything that's maybe passed down to you.
Boozer's Jewelers, where do they find you, Brad?
We're at 1025 North Valley Mills Drive, right on the corner of Lake Air Drive and Valley Mills with the big clock on the corner.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com. This segment is brought to you by Bud Light. Enjoy the smooth, crisp taste of Bud Light beer. Easy to drink, easy to enjoy.
Phil Bennett, longtime college football coach, joins us on Mondays in the 5 o'clock hour. And my goodness, Coach, Craig, Paul, and I, we have a lot to get through. We'll get into the game in Austin and much more in just a moment. But we know how close you are to Seth Luttrell. And that decision yesterday by Brent Venables to change offensive coordinators to Joe John Finley, who's another OU grad. What do you think has happened there? Was it Seth? Was it what he has to work with? Is it the offensive line with nobody coming back? Was it the quarterback decisions? What have you learned?
Before the season, the people that I talked to, not necessarily Seth, but they knew they were limited skill-wise offensively. They put a lot of stock in their quarterback. If you look at them, being honest, David, you see nothing, no game breakers at running back, no wide receivers. Obviously, Arnold needed some help. He wasn't able to get it. Their line are mostly portal guys who look like they might have missed on. So, I think that when you look at Seth's situation, it all starts with the quarterback. And, they had a chance to keep Gabriel last year, and Venables didn't want to keep him. It was something to do with NIL, and the kid felt it. So he immediately, goes to Oregon, and it's just ironic they're the number one team in the country right now. So I think it's a multitude of things.
Do you think that if Venables would have reacted differently to Gabriel bringing up NIL, that he might still be in Norman?
I don't know exactly what was said, but I do know this. The people at Oregon told me that the kid felt like, that he had to leave. So, a lot of things are coming out of Norman right now. I look at their schedule. I'm not sure they're going to win another game. I don't care who their offensive coordinator is. Of course, they'll probably beat Maine, but they're not a very good football team, really, on either side of the ball. And Brent's been there 2 years recruiting. You just don't see the guys that they've had a history of having. They love to hate on the other coach, but they've got some issues, and I don't see them a quick fix. You know, their facilities are not great in the SEC. Someone told me the other day that if you graded facilities, OU's would be in the bottom, and that has a lot to do with your recruiting, whether you're paying them or not.
How does, it's weird. Florida, I think, is like that too. Like when they kind of fell behind. How do schools like that fall behind in this? Do they just, especially ones that do have the funds available and people are all in on supporting the program, how do they fall behind, Phil?
Oh, I don't know if you saw this, but early in the season, Nick Saban made a statement about NILs and the portal. And the thing that we think, just because you go in the portal or you pay a bunch of money in NIL, it's still an evaluation game. And you've got to evaluate right, and you've still got to coach them right and develop them right. It's obvious to me, really, on either, I look at OU's defense. They got a linebacker that's okay player, a couple of secondary. They have no dominant D linemen. They're far from being a great defense. And then offensively, they absolutely have no skill sets at where you would sit there and go, wow, this guy can go the distance. And it was obviously to me that their quarterback needed some help. I think Arnold will be a good player, but when you're breaking in a quarterback, you need some guys with him, and they don't have that right now.
Coach, while Oklahoma struggles, Texas has had a pretty good first year in the SEC, but did take their first loss there on Saturday. Incredible pageantry there in Austin, but a game where everybody's talking about the officiating coming out of this one, and a little bit about Georgia as well, and a little bit about Texas. But what were your thoughts watching that game just in general, but also the officiating controversy that took part as well, and how would you have reacted being in the mix if you were?
The first thing, the two defensive ends that haven't played a lot this year for Georgia were really a factor, especially early in the game. I don't think Texas was ready for them. Texas has a good offensive line. They did not play very good, and especially on the edges. I mean, they were impact. I think they had the quarterback spooked, and I thought their defense. I thought Kirby taking game plan. I thought his game plan was outstanding. He protected the edges. Texas only had like 28, 29 yards rushing. The quarterback was out of the game. When they put Manning in, you could tell that they were trying to get him calmed down. And I just thought at that time, Georgia really, the defense thought that Georgia, with their quarterback throwing 3 picks, would have won that game like that. But they did, because of the great job that they did on defense. I did not feel like that was interference. If anything, it was offensive interference, but I've never seen that happen in my career, or coaching or playing, that after a bottle incident, stopping the game, that evidently, it's my thinking, knowing a little bit how it works, somebody in Birmingham got it to the press box that, hey, these guys just made a bad call. And this was and somehow it got changed. I don't blame Kirby for being extremely livid about the situation, but realistically, if you were looking at that call, if anything, it was an offensive interference. And I don't think it turned the game, because it gave them a chance, but Georgia was just going to close it on them.
I think the damnedest thing is that ultimately, yeah, it was messed up for them to change it, but I think they saved themselves some other grief, because otherwise that game would have been marred by everybody pointing out the bad call, and that's why Texas lost. So at least you got the right winner still at the end. It just was not without some controversy.
And I thought that, like I said, Georgia didn't let anything bother them. They haven't played. I heard Coach Smart talk about it. He said, I've been waiting for that team to play. And he got it that night in a big environment.
So last week when we brought this game up, you thought that there might be a couple of, I don't know if you used the word weaknesses or things that you weren't sure about with UT defense. But I thought that's why they stayed in the game, even though eventually beaten 30-15. And when the game was on the line, Georgia went 90 yards and converted some critical plays. What did you see from UT's defense? Because I thought they ran to the ball pretty well.
Well, I thought they're physical, and I think they're a good defense. But Edney averaged almost 6 yards a carry. He was a factor in the game. Georgia could not run the ball against a bad Mississippi State defense the week before to the level. And I thought some of their run game against Texas was really good. That drive, the over route on third down, obviously Texas lost one of their starting safeties in the game. I think at one point they might have lost both of them. And I think also Georgia did too because of hitting infractions. But I thought the big plays, Georgia made more big plays. And I thought Texas was good, but it was obviously Georgia was the best defense on the field.
What's going on with USC? They don't seem like they should be 3-4. They've got a lot going for them, but they're the most confounding team in the country to me.
Paul, I say this, and it's almost I can say the same thing I said about OU. I've watched USC 3 times. They've got a quarterback, it's first year starting, that is an okay quarterback. They have limited receivers, limited running back. I don't think their offensive line is dominating. And defensively, they still have issues. It's obvious when Maryland, who just got beat soundly by Northwestern, there was some issues. There still is issues defensively. They're not consistently stopping the run. Maryland takes the ball knowing they got to get down to kick a field goal, and they do it. So there's some quality positions that are not playing very well, and I'm not sure of their talent level, to be quite honest.
Coach, as we all expected, Dave Aranda and Baylor rolled into Lubbock and blew out the Red Raiders. We all knew that was coming, right? But in all seriousness, what a much-needed win. What a therapeutic win, I think, in a lot of ways. And just what stood out to you from that performance and just the demolishing of the Red Raiders, who were flying pretty high at 5-1 up until then?
Obviously, the quarterback played really well. But I thought what really helped them was the ability to run the ball. They kept the Texas front. They got after them, and then their play pass. The receivers played good offensively. I thought Jake called a really good game. He attacked. I wonder. This NIL. How many decisions have been made on starting quarterbacks on how much they're paying an NIL quarterback? How this kid hadn't started all year is beyond me. I think this kid is really a good player. I like everything about him. Even in the games that Baylor didn't win, it sure hadn't been at his feet. I really thought that he played like a big-time player. And I think that if he will continue to play, I think it made the defense better. I happened to watch Tech's first game against ACU, so I knew that they could have some issues defensively, especially throwing the ball. And Baylor was able to take both of them, and it was a huge win. It was fun to watch.
Bryson Washington, a kid from not far from where you live in Franklin High School.
Yeah.
A hell of a – they've won like 3 or so state championships and been in a couple of others and lost it. But Keenan Hall told me before the season that Bryson was a difference maker. Not Bijan Robinson or anyone, but he had the it factor. We saw a little bit. He still didn't get a lot of carries. What is a defensive mind like yourself do you see in number 30?
Well, first of all, not one guy brought him down the whole night. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Smoak, but I think he had almost 10 yards a carry. 10 carries is all he had. But he was dynamic. And the other thing, I'd follow him. I have a good friend of mine that I golf with that lives in Franklin, and he's told me all about him. And of course, he's used to winning. He knows what it takes to win.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fun to see him have a game like that. And I will tell you something. He brings it. And I like it. And you look at this schedule, you look at a not very good Oklahoma State defense. these could be some fun games to watch the next couple of weeks.
10 carries, 116 yards. It's 11.6 yards a pop
Yeah.
on the 2 touchdowns. You're right. Yep, in that game against Texas Tech. Paul?
Phil, your Aggies, and actually, I guess you're LSU Tigers, so you coach there as well. But you are an Aggie, and they're rolling along really well. They are. There's no flash to them. I mean, they are just very efficient and good. And LSU's starting to figure it out. That game goes down in Kyle Field this week. Is this the best setup that both of these teams have been at the same time since A&M has joined the SEC?
Well, in 18, if you remember the A&M, probably Jimbo's biggest win was I think it was like 74 to 72 games.
Overtimes, yeah.
Yeah, 7 overtime. But, they're both I think the timing for both teams is right. I mean, it gives the SEC, how lucky they had last week they had Tennessee, Alabama, and then this week they're going to get, LSU dominating Arkansas, A&M going into a Starkville where they've struggled for a long time, grinding to win out. I like what Coach is doing here at A&M. I mean, they're not flashy. I think Collins doing a really good job on offense. Last week they were able to run the ball a lot and run it well against Mississippi State, and the quarterback didn't play great, but I think he can play better than that. And I thought defensively they did enough. Jeff is first time they've probably seen a tempo to the level that Jeff gave them, and of course Jeff helped them. I'm sort of still scratching my head on that fake punt at the 20-yard line in the second half, but I know A&M appreciated that. But I think this game this weekend it's going to be a night game, and I think that it could be a fun game to watch. I think the quarterback at LSU is starting to hit a stride. They're better on defense. I don't think they're great, though. I think A&M can still run the ball. I think they can do some things. I think this will be a fun game to watch.
You mentioned Levy of Mississippi State there. His first time as a head coach. They're 1-6, but they played 1-5. They played Texas and Georgia back-to-back on the road, and then at home against the number 14 A&M squad. Lost by 10 to Georgia, lost by 10 to A&M. They've got that young quarterback. It seems like even though the wins aren't happening right now, there's some positives that are building there in Starkville. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, they know they have work to do on defense. And the quarterback, he's going to get better and better. He's obviously very talented. The receivers are doing some good things. They're running the ball well. I mean, and Jeff is one of those guys, a lot of people, and I always said this about Art, it's not all about throwing. It's what the defense will give you. And he ran the ball, and, they've got to do a better job defensively, and I think they can. But yes, I think there are some bright spots. And, it's so saying we laugh. Art and I talked about, so you want to be a head coach. Those sometimes those press conferences, when they start making fun of you, are no fun.
No, you're right about that. Florida, Billy Napier, kind of randomly bringing them up. They've kind of dug themselves out of a hole, 4-3. Lagway's playing well, gives them the big play potential. Then they got this big dude at running back, Ball, who scores 5 touchdowns. It seemed like I don't know, but it looks like they've turned the corner a little bit.
Billy and Rob Sales, his offense coordinator, were both with me at Arizona State. And I see this a different way. I text Rob. He probably didn't like it, but I said, I'm glad that Merck's out of the way, then this kid can play. He will give you a chance. And I believe that. I believe this kid will get better and better. And when you have guys like that, that's what I was saying about Oklahoma and about USC. I don't see firepower in anything they're doing. Florida has shown spots of having skill and skill guys. And, the good thing for Billy and for Rob is both these guys are freshmen. And I think Lagway has a chance to really finish. It's going to be tough because they got a tough schedule, but and they're getting a little bit better defensively, but they have a chance to get going.
Phil, they've really pulled themselves out of it. Graham Mertz, here's how I felt watching him. He's not a guy who's going to get you beat, but simultaneously, he's also not a guy who's going to help you win. And that's kind of a weird spot to be.
Well, Art Briles used to call them 21 to 14 guys. They'll get you beat 21 to 14 every week. And if you're asking a guy to be the guy, he's got to be the distributor. And I saw that. And I knew Billy was trying to appease him. Once again, I know it's being critical, but in today's environment, you better play your best players. I say this about I'm flabbergasted that Sawyer, watching him, didn't start above everybody they had at Baylor. So, but I'm retired, and what do I know?
Well, one more thing, and I know we've had you a long time. What did you know, or did you ever bump into or have anybody that ever played for or coached with Curt Cignetti at Indiana? Because he looks like he's got himself a hell of a team.
I know Curt well. I knew Curt. I've known him forever. His brother was our offensive coordinator at Pitt with me. Okay. I know the whole family. And I'm going to tell you something. You have to applaud Curt. Curt was probably the lowest level on Nick Saban's staff at Alabama, and had a great job. Could have stayed there forever. And he said, "I want to be a head coach." And he went to a Division II program, Indiana University, that's right out of Pittsburgh. Knew about it from when he was at West Virginia, and he took that job, made it. Then he went to Elon, went to James Madison. Both of his coordinators played for us at Pitt. His offensive coordinator, Tino Sinceri, his dad is Sal Sinceri. There's a lot of ties there, and I tell you, it's been fun for me to watch him. I read his comment, and this is Curt. And you would think he's being sort of uppity when he says, you Google me.
Yeah.
And it says winner.
Yep, that's exactly right.
The truth of the matter is, I didn't Google him, but I knew that he's winning, and he's done a good job. And that game Saturday sort of blew me away. I thought that would be really a back and forth game. I thought it would be a close game, and they totally dominated them.
Yep, and it looks like if Rule and Nebraska aren't careful, this could be another late season slide. Ohio State's next. Oh, well. Thank you, man. Great stuff.
All right, guys.
What's the next thing you're going to put on your grill? Not maybe tonight or whenever it is. What's it going to be?
Friday night, I'm going to do some tenderloins.
There you go.
Right behind me.
There you go. I can't wait. Thank you, man. Appreciate it, Phil.
Guys.
Coach Phil Bennett with us on 365 Sports. And let's not forget now that not this weekend, homecoming Oklahoma State, that the week after that, Baylor was announced the game with TCU is going to be a blackout game, which brings back the memories of 2016.
You know what?
When all hell broke loose and Jim Grove was the head coach, and that was a nightmare night. TCU took Baylor's football soul that took a couple of years to get over. But that's going to be a night game and a blackout game coming up, not this week, but the following week. Garrett, I know we've got to get to the Big 12. Yeah, we'll do a couple of the other college football notes on coaches. We already did the Seth Luttrell, but Utah had an offensive coordinator change that and more. And the Big 12 North pod is next on 365 Sports.
Richard Carr, Buick GMC Cadillac, they are the people that you can count on for all of your automotive needs, and I counted on them in the last couple of weeks. Had a wreck and needed to get my car fixed up, radiator all messed up, and a lot of other issues as well. Thousands of dollars in damage. Fortunately, it wasn't totaled, but when I needed to get taken care of, I took it over to Richard Carr, and their service department hooked me up, and they will hook you up as well and make it not so time-consuming and fuzzy as to when you're going to get your car back. I got constant updates from Donnie on the progress of my vehicle and an exact timeline of how long it would take, and they actually got it back to me a day earlier than I expected, so I do appreciate them over there, and that is the fine customer service they have that I can speak to personally over at Richard Carr. But they've also got plenty of savings going on right now as well. Get to the scary savings event on pre-owned cars and trucks at Richard Carr. Right now, they've got the GMC Sierras, which is no secret, the best truck on the road. It's got a multi-pro tailgate, first-class interior, power to spare. The GMC Sierra is the truck for Texans who want to drive the best, and right now you can save $8,000 or more on all 2024 GMC Sierra SLT trucks in stock. We've also got the AT4X Sierras and four-wheel drive versions with big savings as well. You can find Sierra truck options over at Richard Carr under $40,000. Just check out more information over at the dealership. But that is one of the offerings that you have right now over at Richard Carr. So check out their website. Give them a phone call. Go visit them in person. You can see all of the deals from new to pre-owned vehicles and their award-winning customer service department as well. And if you want value and confidence when looking for a pre-owned car or truck, their lot is loaded with over 100 highly inspected used vehicles priced to move. So whatever you're looking for, they can hook you up. Treat yourself with a new car or truck or find monster savings at the Richard Carr Scary Savings Event going on now.
Edward Jones financial advisors Ben Erlinson, Brad Wilson, and Cam Heathcott understand these are difficult and changing times we live in, but they know how important your financial investments are to you. So is your financial advisor staying in touch with you and helping you navigate today's financial climate? Invest with Edward Jones financial advisors Ben Erlinson, Chuck Verno, Brad Wilson, and Cam Heathcott, who invest their time and experience back to you and your money. And like coaching athletes, investing money is about time, patience, and encouragement. Contact Ben Erlinson at 254-759-8533. Brad Wilson's location at 250 Sharon Drive in Woodway, and Cam Heathcott in Conroe. Edward Jones Financial Advisors, Ben Erlinson, Brad Wilson, and Cam Heathcott, proud sponsors of 365 Sports. Edward Jones, making sense of investing, member SIPC.
Is your car ready for a makeover? Get ready to fall in love with your ride again at City Tire and Battery. City Tire and Battery is family owned and has provided expert service with top quality products since 1942. And with financing available, there's no reason to put off those much needed upgrades. Give your car the love it deserves and go see City Tire and Battery, located at 1502 South Valley Mills in Waco.
New arrivals just dropped at Barefoot Campus Outfitter in Waco. Looking for the best Baylor gear? Barefoot is the place to grab your gear. Game day polos, tees, tanks, caps, clear stadium bags, jewelry, and more. Barefoot Outfitters has all the essentials with unique campus apparel and offering comfortable garments and designs. Long-lasting images that people continue to enjoy wearing time and time again. Located right off I-35 on Spate, or shop at barefoottcampusoutfitter.com and get free shipping on orders $75 or more. Go Bears!
Everything we do for you. First Central Credit Union says it's game on. Lower your monthly vehicle payments by refinancing your vehicle with First Central. Make it a winning season with refinancing set to your preferences. You decide the due date and frequency. Financed elsewhere? Save money with a new local game plan. Apply online today. We make it easy to score at firstcentralcu.com.
Membership and loan policy requirements apply. Member NCUA.
Texas Farm Bureau Insurance has protected fellow Texans with auto, home, health, and life insurance since 1952. With more than 260,000 square miles of land and 27 million people, that's a lot to cover. Whether you're wrangling cattle or wrangling kids, we're proud to protect Texans in all Texan ways of life.
Call Deborah Holder at 254-300-7202 to see if you qualify to save up to 40% on your auto insurance.
Coverage and discounts are subject to qualifications and policy terms and may vary by situation.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
The 5 o'clock hour is sponsored by Edward Jones Investments with financial advisor Ben Erlinson, who'll navigate you through today's financial climate. Edward Jones, making sense of investing.
Now, here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
All right, the Big 12 pod. This week, we rotated throughout the weeks. Today is the Big 12 North, which includes Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, TCU, and Baylor. We have discussed Baylor quite a bit. We've discussed Tech a little bit and haven't really said too much about TCU or even a little bit about Oklahoma State. But let's start with Baylor. Paul, we start with you. It was impressive. It was 59-35, and now they have Oklahoma State.
Yeah, so this is the Big 12 South pod.
That's the
What
word
did I
of the
say?
Big 12
The South.
North.
Yeah. No, today is supposed to be the South. It's my fault.
Okay.
I got us wrong. It's supposed to be
Okay.
South goes, because the North was on Thursday. The South was on Thursday, so it's North.
Okay.
This is the South.
Okay, so we're going to the Big 12 South. I thought Baylor was fantastic. I thought everything they did pretty much was good. I mean, they didn't turn the ball over. Sorry, Robertson looked as good as he has, and solidifies each week why he should be the starter. Obviously, Tech's got some problems, and I know we'll talk about them in a minute. But that was a big one, and now Baylor goes into a schedule, the rest of the schedule, where all the teams are like them, and if they can catch Oklahoma State in the midst of an emotional free fall, then that's going to get them to 500. So they've got to go and do that this week. So I was impressed. I was like Bryson Washington's. He's a guy. Like they have all these other players that can do kind of. There might be kind of specialty players like Richard Reese or Dawson Pendergrass, and like then they kind of do one thing. He feels like a back that, when it's all said and done, can do all the things. Plus, I was just thrilled, and I'll say it again for Josh Cameron having the monster game that he did. He's always played well, but that was just that game was a payoff for a lot of years of hard work.
Yeah, that was a desperately needed win to get them out of a rut, and I don't know if it catapults them to something greater down the stretch of the season, but it's certainly possible if they play that way and if they have the level of intensity and physicality that they had on Saturday. They beat up Tech. I mean, they went to Lubbock and beat up Tech, and Tech's the one that's supposed to be, physical and, all these kind of things that you talk about that you want in a football team. I think Joey McGuire, has a lot of catchphrases and things and identities that revolve around that program, and being West Texas tough is one of those. And Baylor went out to West Texas and was the tougher football team. So not only that, but I just thought that they were the better football team. They outcoached Texas Tech, threw them for a loop offensively, defensively, threw some things that they didn't expect. And I know that's every game. There's that coaching chess match, but I just think that's another area where you check the box next to Baylor and say, physicality, yep. Performance, yep. Coaching, yep. Big plays, yep. I mean, they beat them in every way, shape, and form. So was not expecting that. Thought that they would play well, but not go out and just, destroy Tech for all intents and purposes at Jones AT&T. So was pleasantly surprised and feel like this leads to kind of what Aranda referred to after the game of the beginning of something, not the ending of one good win and then you revert back to normal, or it's just up and down, but like, hey, here's a launching point for us to go and win some very winnable games down the stretch. You're favored at home against Oklahoma State. You hadn't had a signature win in forever. You went and got that on Saturday. You know what you haven't had in forever? A home win of substance. And so this would be a great opportunity with an Oklahoma State team that's really struggling to go and do that. And you know what? That's your first back-to-back wins in like 2 years that matter. So there's way more out there for the taking. That's the big story here. But, man, it feels good to talk about a dadgum win, and it definitely feels good to talk about an emphatic win over somebody that's not somebody you paid to go beat up.
Absolutely. Couldn't say it any better. About midway through 2022, that looked like they were going to follow up 12-2, not with 12-2, but a 8-9, maybe, who knows, 10-win season. Went to Lubbock and won, went to Norman and won. I've brought that up so many times because nothing else really happened since then. And then they go to Lubbock again, and maybe, I don't know if it kickstarts them. They can't take anybody for granted, but it was refreshing, no doubt. Which then leads us to, I guess we'll go to Texas Tech and Joey McGuire, unbeaten 3-1 and 3-0 until that loss. 5-2. They had bigger fish to fry if they could just keep winning, and now they've just got to make sure they don't fall into one of these Big 12 2 or 3 game slumps.
Yeah, they've got to do much better. They've got to do much better in games like this when they have an opportunity. But look, Baylor was ready to go. I mean, you can't. Sometimes you run into that team that was just prepared, locked in, and all that. Maybe maybe they let some complacency get in there after they had to kind of fight back to get the 4 wins in a row that they did at 5-1. I don't think this is obviously like a death knell in their season, but it certainly throws into question how viable they are to stay in the conference race. So they can't. You can't keep giving up 40 and 50 points and almost 60 points in games and expect to hang, especially with the teams that are in this. But there are some good things they've had. The quarterback's been healthy. Taj Brooks is healthy. They have a lot of good wide receivers. But defensively, man, they've got to start being able to win some games on that side of the ball.
Well, they were 5-1, and depending on which way you want to look at it, as a flimsy 5-1 or just a hey, this is your type of year, 5-1, but I think we're seeing the latter more for the BYUs and the Iowa States of the world with wins like they had on Saturday night where, they're able to escape. With Tech, it was a situation where you could argue they were barely beating teams they should have beat by more, but regardless, they found themselves in a lot of close games, and part of the reason why they found themselves in a lot of close games is because they don't have a very good defense. That's been obvious throughout. There's been some obvious issues with this team that they've been able to get around or overcome, but that was not the case on Saturday. So I think, this is just a wake-up call or a reality check for everybody who kind of thought this might be the case but weren't quite sure. Like, should we get really excited about 5-1, or is this kind of I use the word again, kind of flimsy 5-1? And I think, unfortunately, it's a little bit of a flimsy 5-1. Not that they didn't go out and earn it, but I think, the way you think of a 5-1 team, that's not exactly where they are in the pecking order. And so now it's a little bit of a step back to probably where they actually are, which is more in that middle crowd of the Big 12. So I think that's about right for them. Now, as far as where they find themselves, ultimately, the scary part is you've got to go to TCU, who is arguably a better team. We'll see. I mean, that should be an interesting game. And then to Ames, which I don't think you feel great about that. You got Colorado at home. With your defense, I don't think you are really feeling that hot about that matchup. And the whole part about being at home, that's kind of bubble bursted after Saturday too, is it not? You got at Oklahoma State and then West Virginia at home to close out the year. So those last two, not as bad, but they got to be really careful navigating this week with TCU in Fort Worth. How they respond to this, I think, will be key to where they find themselves at the end of the year, because you could let one loss turn into like a 3-game losing streak, and then all of a sudden, you're like, we got to win one game in these last 2 to make a bowl game, and that's not where you thought you were going to find yourself when you were 5-1. So they won some close games. I think it covered up some of their warts, or you just hope maybe put them to the side and they would navigate, but Baylor just ripped the mask off and said, no, this is really who you are, and you're going to have to deal with these issues or get better to win some games down the stretch. But that was a gut punch. I mean, when you had all this momentum, Tech fans know the feeling all too well, the roller coaster of getting excited about something only for the bubble to get burst. And I think it got burst on Saturday to a degree. There's still a lot out there to play for, but again, it was a reality check that I don't think anybody was expecting the way that it went down.
Garrett, do you have that one tweet that I sent to you that refers to Texas Tech, West Virginia, and Rutgers about top 25 appearances?
Give me 1 second.
All right. Because this is where I received DMs, private messages, and others. Here's a note about where Texas Tech is in football. They have, and Texas Tech fans know this, 3 teams have not been ranked in the AP Top 25 since 2019. Now, this is not like 25 years. 2 of them are in the Big 12. Texas Tech, West Virginia, and Rutgers. And Rutgers was not far from popping into that. You'd think West Virginia, but we know they're having a struggle year too. And Tech was right there on the cusp this year.
West Virginia is the one that by far wants their coach gone more than anybody else at this point.
Yeah.
By far.
Rutgers is thrilled.
UCF's up there too.
Yeah. UCF is falling out of love real quick with Gus.
All the people calling for Aranda said they were really quiet on Saturday. I don't know what happened to those folks, but it's almost like doing something in the middle of the year when you got a bunch of games left would be kind of idiotic.
Yeah.
Because look at what happened on Saturday. You would have missed out on that entirely. Now, again, we might revisit that like next week if they get beat by Oklahoma State at home, but that whole conversation was just stupidity to me. And I'm glad that Mack Rhodes is more patient and didn't allow that to happen. But you want to talk about actual hot seats now. Aranda, for the moment, is a little bit off that. Neil Brown is in the lead pack, and Gus Malzahn's like trailing right behind him right now.
Yeah. I mean,
and there's people that are a little topsy-turvy on Joey. I mean, because they've seen this show before of like, hey, we're about to get there. And then you get blown out at home to Baylor. And, like there's just, again, I call it that roller coaster, and it feels like that's what Tech's kind of been on of like you're waiting for them to go up and grab the bull by the horns on Saturday and be 6-1 and beat a beatable Baylor team and successful homecoming. And instead, you're talking about a blowout loss on homecoming to a bad Baylor team, and that's just, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, no, look, there's the top 5 tomorrow is 2025 hot seats. And these are guys I don't think are getting fired this year, but might get fired next year. And I'll just preview Gus Malzahn's on it. I think they'll give him the benefit of the doubt for one more year, unless they completely crater and keep losing. Then they might be pushed into a situation, maybe kind of like Brent Venables in Oklahoma this year. I thought that one might wait another year, but golly, I mean, he's they've got a daunting schedule ahead of them. But yeah, Joey, I don't think they're quite there yet. I think Tech fan base needs to realize they need to fix some other things, and that they're pointed in the right direction. And to change horses in midstream here on Joey, I think would be a bad idea. But he does need to make some changes on defense for sure, and he knows that. Like there's nobody that he didn't wake up in the morning and go, oh damn, 59 points. Oh well, off to next week. Like, believe me, he's thinking about it.
Oh no, he looked sick on Saturday.
Yeah,
he was absolutely sick.
Back-to-back losses when he played Baylor at home after spanking Baylor. It may be turning the corner with that, but so there we are with Tech, and they've just got to be very careful and go weak. But they lost it. They did have one defensive lineman, their best player on the defensive line, that went out early. That didn't help, but still they got mauled in that game. And now TCU. How about TCU going to Utah against a team? Yeah, they're crippled too, but getting a win and a huge win for Sonny Dykes and also the Frogs.
Yeah, that was a game that I don't wish my enemies to watch, that Utah-TCU game, but it was a nice win for TCU. Just a very ugly ball game, very ugly, in various ways, especially more so for the Utah side. But TCU got the job done. I mean, to walk into Salt Lake, kind of relive those memories of when these two were conference mates way back in the day, and kind of like the whole look at us meme now, the Paul Rudd look at us, like here we are all these years later, and we're in the a power conference together playing each other. So I thought that was cool. But, yeah, that was a really ugly game. I mean, TCU got up early and then never built off their lead. And Utah was just, completely deficient offensively at the quarterback position and obviously only mustered a touchdown in this game. So I don't know. I think TCU is a very talented team. Everybody says that about them because it's true. But as far as like who's going to show up on a week-to-week basis, I don't know. I think they're a team that could definitely go on a little bit of a run. 4-3, 2-2 in the conference. They can definitely finish on the positive side of the records based on their remaining schedule. But they're also a team that it depends on who shows up. Like you're the team that lost to Houston 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, whenever that was. You beat Utah by 6. I mean, you scored 13 points. Utah's defense is great, but like still, guys, like that's not going to cut it. So, they're a weird team where they're not terrible, but they're not great. They're just somewhere in the middle, and that's probably where they're going to find themselves ultimately, maybe a shade above that because of the talent level that they have. But I'm not like super encouraged. I do think that was a good win though, to go out to Salt Lake, not really knowing what to expect, and to just get a win however you got it was important. So that was a good thing. And now I think you feel good about your chances against Texas Tech in Fort Worth this weekend, which could put you at 5-3, 3-2 in the conference. And I think you're feeling a lot better than you did about 3 weeks ago when SMU's blowing you out and you're losing to Houston. And they're in a better spot now.
Yeah, I mean that. Like I don't know what to take out of that game with Utah. I don't know. If Mr. Rogers had come and sit down, getting ready to take his sweater off and go back out the door and said, "What did we learn today?" I'd have been like, "I don't know, Fred. I have no idea. I got nothing. But
here." This is so anti a Kyle Whittingham team. Yeah, injuries can cripple you, but they are always next man up and just keep chopping wood, right?
That's why I would say that. Like, I don't know what we learned today. Like, it just sometimes you look at a game and you go, All right, well, that happened.
Yep.
And that's kind of how I feel about the Utah TCU game. But like Craig said, they're looking at down a schedule in the face where they can make some things happen and get some heat off their coaching staff, which was kind of justifiable in the last month.
Yeah, there was a lot of it seemed like inner turmoil. Michael DeHart, West Virginia had just been competitive and lost in a close game except Pitt. I'd be supporting Neil Brown. Michael DeHart's off the Neil Brown. He's not in that fan club anymore. And a lot of West Virginia fans aren't either, as they've kind of just started tripping over themselves. Then that leads us to who Baylor will host this weekend in the Big 12 South Pod, and that's Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy.
Yeah, that was a brutal loss to BYU. I mean, they had it there for the taking. Their defense just can't get a stop, couldn't get a stop. And throw them back out there right this moment, they wouldn't get a stop. I mean, you could just see the writing on the wall, even though there was this hint of hope that, hey, there's only 1 minute left. They've got the whole field to go. You can get one here. Just if you're going to get a stop, get it right now. And they couldn't do it. Poor tackling. Just everybody's seen the Lassiter touchdown and how much of a gut punch that was to not only lose in the last minute, but lose with just an ugly-looking defensive effort like that. So it's been an ugly season. It's a season that's not going to necessarily get better by beating Baylor, but to just get the losses out of your taste buds for a few days would be really nice. So I expect a competitive effort, but man, Alan Bowman actually played okay in some spots, but he also just does stuff. You're like, how are you still doing this? Obviously, it's just who you are. It's just who you are, but like, God, it's maddening to watch sometimes. But I thought he played pretty well overall. But they just don't have the defense. Ollie Gordon was hurt off and on again. I don't see him lasting until the end of the year. I don't even know what the latest update on him is. He kept coming in and out. So I credit him for the effort, but they're kind of just all out of sorts. And obviously injuries have taken their toll on this season. But God, I felt terrible for them because they were so close to a monumental win in what has otherwise been a season of disappointment. And just, I guess, going with more of the same, more disappointment in a game where you didn't even have high hopes going into it, but you set yourself up to be disappointed because the team showed up and played the way that they did and gave you a chance. You couldn't close it out. So, I would love to have seen what would happen if Rangel would have been healthy because, man, they were all over that BYU defense, and then he busts off that long run, gets hurt, going down, getting tackled. And then, like I said, Bowman was okay, but Rangel was a wild card that BYU, sure, they would have adjusted to, I'm sure, at some point, but he had opened things up a little bit for Oklahoma State, so that just sucked to see him get hurt. Gordon gets hurt, and that took a lot of air out of their sails as well. But I give them credit for the effort. They played hard, and they almost got the job done.
Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, TCU, Baylor. Anything on Oklahoma State, Paul?
Look, they finally figured something out, and then they had the injury to Garrett Rangel, which is a gut punch. Ollie Gordon's trying to tough through some things, but you wonder, how many losses before he just shuts it down and tries to get healthy. I don't know. Yeah, Oklahoma State they can't buy it the right way this year.
Yeah, it's just, they're at the bottom of the Big 12 standings. At the bottom of the Big 12 standings at 0-4. Which is stunning to me. Before we go to the top 5, I want to get to some of those in the chat room. I know Paul's got the top 5. I got to give Wet Blanket credit. He said back last week, and I copied and pasted a couple of the comments, and I do that the Gamecocks would crush Oklahoma. He was right. So I wanted to bring that up. Also, from D. Wayne in the chat room, Miranda will get fired in Lubbock when Tech blows out Baylor 50-10 in a couple of weeks. That one was a miss. And I don't just bring up the ones that are good or bad. I just sometimes I'll copy a few of them, and I got that one too. Garrett, do you have the picture of Kim Coulter's tent?
1 second.
Because Kim Coulter, who has been a part of this show for a long, long time, and there are some that have been loyal to us from almost day one, here is what his tent was like on Saturday morning, getting ready for the game between Baylor and Texas Tech in Lubbock. He has that 365 logo everywhere. And my God, thank you, Kim Coulter, for promoting us and what you say on that tent about this show. Thank you so much for the publicity And Bobby from Myrtle Beach, your fan from Myrtle Beach, Neil Brown, has been advocating for Trust the Climb. I no longer trust the climb. And Bobby from Myrtle Beach, thank you very much for your email. This is 365 Sports.
If your business is like most, you need things done quickly. But if you're still tying your critical applications together on multiple shared public networks, you've probably been feeling the slowdown. And that's no good for business. A private UPN fiber network can get you and your business moving at the speed of light. Whatever you need, we can build it. Internet, Metro Ethernet, Waves, dark fiber. We deliver custom private networks and are focused on business customers only. Our next generation 100% fiber optic infrastructure offers you low latency and ultra scalable bandwidth with speeds up to 100 gigabit to run your critical applications. Your connection won't be limiting your performance anymore. It's diverse and scalable, so it can grow and change as your business grows and changes. And with a secure carrier-grade private network, you'll have all the reliability you need. Contact UPN today to learn more. Fast just got faster.
For Paul Catalina's Top 5, brought to you by Texas Beef House. Where's the best beef in Texas? Your house when you order from Texas Beef House. Unleash the flavor of Texas raised Wagyu. From our pasture to your plate, TexasBeefHouse.com.
Welcome in on your Monday. Top 5 Week 8 awards. Presented by Texas Beef House. Use our promo code 365sports for a discount at checkout. Let's go. Number 5. The This Is What You Wanted award goes to the University of Texas. Also, honorable mention to Oklahoma. When you join the SEC, these are the kind of games you get. Does this derail Texas's season and make me think that they're any less of a championship contender? No, but it does, maybe take some of the wind out of their sails. They had not played a great schedule up until Georgia, and these are the things that you kind of pay for sometimes when that happens in the SEC. That first elite team you play a little faster, a little bigger, a little stronger than what you've been playing. Now the teeth of Texas's schedule comes along. It will be harder, but they're still really good. But you wanted controversy, you wanted all this stuff. This is the SEC. Welcome aboard into Oklahoma, struggling mightily the last couple weeks. Also, this is what you get when you follow Texas places. Number 4, the Hello Darkness My Old Friend Award goes to Oklahoma State. This Oklahoma State team looks like a couple years ago, besieged by injuries. Nothing works. They've now lost 4 games in a row. They just played their best game in a month and still lost on the road to BYU at the end of that game. Mike Gundy struggling to find any kind of offensive continuity. Ollie Gordon finally had a big game, especially in the first half against BYU. Garrett Rangel had a big run, and maybe you saw some athleticism. Then he ggets hurt, likely out for the rest of the year. Alan Bowman back in, so right back where you started in Stillwater. Gonna be a long rest of the season for the Pokes. Number 3, the Easily Persuaded Award goes to the SEC officials. Now, I use this old Hank Stram gift because he was the best at harassing officials, but has nothing on the UT fans. Now, look, I don't know if they changed the call because of the garbage that was thrown onto the field or whatever. The problem is there's the perception that it was. The University of Texas, to their credit, has responded forcefully and strong, banning the people who threw bottles onto the field and threatening to take away alcohol sales, which I don't think they'll do yet. But the referee crew made a decision that made it look like they were persuaded by that situation. You cannot do that and create that perception, whether it's true or not, whether you got together and decided that it wasn't in fact a penalty, which it wasn't, or the delay caused you to think about it and all these things happen. You said, okay, it's not a penalty. Well, now you're telling the mob that they can do what they want, which is a mistake. Sometimes there are bad calls and sometimes you have to stick by them. And that's why the NCAA needs to make their refs more accountable, because the only people that held the refs accountable there were the fans, and that's not the people who should be doing it. In the NFL, they have a pool reporter that asks them questions, and then that's when they are held accountable, and you can move all this stuff along down the line. But what happened at Texas was just a bad look. No matter if the officials were or were not influenced by the trash, it definitely looks to a lot of people like they were. So you can't just do that. You have to be a little bit smarter and think ahead if you're the officials. And yes, they got the call right. It's just the manner in which it came about which is going to be called into question. Number 2, and so it begins award goes to currently offensive coordinators. Seth Luttrell out at Oklahoma, Andy Ludwig out at Utah. This is the time of year where people start to call the assistant herd. And yes, we've had a couple of head coaches let go, but right now it's let's make an in-season change with our assistant, see if the play calling duties or whatever can be changed and move on if that can help us. Well, in Oklahoma's case, I don't think Seth Luttrell's the problem. The problem is their talent. And at Utah, the problem is the fact that they don't have Cam Rising and won't for the rest of the year, and have not had him except for a couple games early in the year. So the offense built around having that quarterback, which they've not really had in 2 years, is the problem. Was it Andy Ludwig? Was it Seth Luttrell? Probably in part, but believe me, there are bigger fish to fry when you don't have the Johnnies and Joes. It's harder for the guy with the play sheet to put them in positions to win. And number 1, the Tums Award goes to Neil Brown at West Virginia. On a week where people were buying plane advertisements to say, fire Neil Brown, he gave up 45 points at home. He's going to need some Tums. The up and down nature of the Neil Brown coaching roller coaster at West Virginia is on a downslope. Now, hoping for West Virginia that they spike back up, but he's putting Ren Baker in a position where he's going to have to address it sooner rather than later, because another good team rolls into Morgantown and another good team wins. They beat the teams they're supposed to beat, but again, they are clearly behind the upper echelon teams. Penn State, Pitt, who I'm crazy saying upper echelon, Kansas State and others, Iowa State, they lose those games and they keep losing those games. So the Tums Award goes to Neil Brown at West Virginia. That's going to do it for us. Now it's time to say goodbye.
That Tums can work now. I don't like that shocky feel with it, though. I'd rather just take my morning off-brand Prilosec if I possibly can.
This is how we get popular on TikTok. It's by talking about things like this. Get with the young kids, the Prilosec
TikTok,
routine.
Yeah, they're like, hey, you know, kids, I'm here to talk to you about Prilosec.
Garrett, do you have the UNLV Ricky White III text or tweet?
Hang on, let me find it.
All right. By the way, Craig, you had an update and a great article in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which was on SicEm365.com in the premium section, where he breaks down the good, the bad, and the ugly. And listen, those have been hard to write for the last 6 weeks, last 2 or 3 years. But Xavier Newman, former Baylor offensive lineman, went down yesterday, carted off, but apparently everything is going to be okay. Ricky White III, he didn't block a punt. He blocked 3 punts. That's about to be maybe the best game of the weekend.
3 this year.
Okay,
Yeah.
3 this year. That's about to be the best game maybe of the weekend, UNLV Boise State. But 3 block punts this season for Ricky White III, which fits his name with Roman numeral number 3. 3. Who was the best? Frank Beamer, Virginia Tech probably had some guys who did that.
He has 3 by himself this year. The next closest program has 2.
That's incredible. It's
Yeah.
a great deal, and what a showdown that's going to be. And that's a Friday night game and we'll get more into the top 25 and bangers and Big 12 schedule and more as the week goes on. All right, thank you all for your time. Thanks to our great sponsors. Thanks to the viewers of 365 Sports. You also can watch us on Twitter at 365 Sports YT and also on Sikkim 365 app. For Emery Winter, who's working on 365 Sports tonight at 10:30 on the CW. Garrett Ross, Jack McKenzie. He picked Tech. No, he picked Baylor. He and Grayson were the only ones who did over the weekend. And Craig Smoak and Paul Catalina, thank you again for your time. We never take it for granted. Back again tomorrow at 3 and Paul's triple option at 1. This is 365 Sports. Good night.